Hi everyone, welcome to the Cartoonology channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today we'll be looking at one insane theory for every SpongeBob character. But before we jump in, if you enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps us keep making better videos for everyone here. Alright, let's get into it. SpongeBob, the Identity Absorber. SpongeBob SquarePants seems like the happiest, most stable character in Bikini Bottom. He wakes up every morning with the same enthusiasm, cooks Krabby Patties with the same passion, and greets his friends with the same cheerful energy. He's consistent, reliable, and unchanging. Here's the thing though, maybe SpongeBob stays so consistent because he has no core identity left to change. Maybe what we're watching is a sea sponge who's been absorbing the personalities, behaviors, and characteristics of everyone around him for so long that the original SpongeBob disappeared years ago. This theory suggests SpongeBob's biological nature as a sponge goes far beyond his ability to clean up messes or absorb water. Real sea sponges are filter feeders that constantly pull in their environment, processing everything that flows through them. SpongeBob might be doing the same thing with personalities, memories, and identities. Every interaction, every conversation, every moment spent with someone else could be slowly overwriting who SpongeBob originally was. The cheerful fry cook we know might be a patchwork construction, bits and pieces of Gary, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Sandy, and countless others, all stitched together into something that looks like a person but has no true self underneath. The evidence for this theory appears in two particularly revealing episodes that show SpongeBob's absorptive abilities in ways that should genuinely disturb anyone paying attention. These episodes demonstrate that SpongeBob's tendency to take on the traits of others goes beyond simple imitation or admiration. His body physically transforms, his mind completely rewrites itself, and his original identity becomes so buried that he literally cannot remember who he is. What we're seeing might be the slow death of an individual consciousness, replaced by an ever-shifting mirror of whoever happens to be nearby. I Was a Teenage Gary stands as one of the most unsettling episodes in the entire series, and most people remember it for the body horror of SpongeBob's transformation. The setup seems innocent enough. Squidward agrees to watch Gary while SpongeBob and Patrick go to a jellyfish convention. Squidward immediately forgets about Gary, leaving him unfed and uncared for the entire weekend. When SpongeBob returns, Gary looks ancient and withered, barely clinging to life. A veterinarian arrives and declares that Gary needs snail plasma, handing SpongeBob a syringe and then immediately leaving because he's too squeamish to administer it himself. SpongeBob panics because he's squeamish too, so Squidward reluctantly agrees to give Gary the shot. SpongeBob keeps pulling Gary away at the last second, worried Squidward will hurt him, creating a chaotic scene where Squidward tries repeatedly to inject the snail. Finally, in the confusion, Squidward accidentally stabs the syringe directly into SpongeBob's nose, injecting him with snail plasma instead of Gary. SpongeBob immediately worries about what will happen to him, but Squidward dismisses his concerns, insisting the snail plasma is harmless and everything's all in his head. Gary turns out to be fine, he just needed water. Squidward leaves, confident that SpongeBob will be perfectly okay. That's when things take a dark turn that reveals something fundamental about SpongeBob's biology. Later that evening, SpongeBob pours food into Gary's bowl, but before giving it to Gary, he decides to taste it himself. He likes it so much that he eats the entire bowl, then brings the empty dish to Gary and apologizes, saying he couldn't control himself. Then SpongeBob meows, just once, involuntarily. He's confused and frightened by his own behavior, wondering if he's cracking up. The transformation accelerates rapidly from there. SpongeBob tries to walk out of the kitchen, but his footsteps become heavy and slow, pounding against the floor. His movement gets slower and slower until Gary is moving faster than him. SpongeBob sluggishly makes his way to the bathroom, still trying to convince himself he's fine. He looks in the mirror and says, "Never better," but his voice echoes strangely. Suddenly, his head begins to throb. His pores grow and shrink rhythmically before returning to normal. He insists he's okay, repeating that Squidward said I'm fine. Then the real horror begins. SpongeBob's eyes bulge out of his head and he screams. They pop back to normal for half a second, giving a brief moment of relief before they bulge out even farther, looking completely unnatural. The eyes continue to transform, taking the shape of snail eye stalks. SpongeBob stares at his new eye stalks in the mirror, watching as they develop skin and eyelids, becoming fully functional snail eyes. He turns to Gary and insists he's still fine, but his body has other ideas. SpongeBob falls to his hands and knees, straining in pain. His hand and arm slowly retract into his sleeve, which pops off and bounces away. He tries to laugh it off, saying, "I'm a lefty anyway," but then his left hand falls off too, creating an error in his own logic. His feet and legs retract into his pants. His entire body shortens and compresses into a snail shape. He tries to say, "Something is wrong with me," but loses the ability to speak mid-sentence, finishing with a simple meow. The transformation is complete. SpongeBob has become a full sponge-snail hybrid, physically indistinguishable from an actual snail, except for his rectangular shape and yellow color. Here's what makes this episode so significant for the absorption theory. SpongeBob's entire physical structure rewrites itself. His DNA apparently resequences. His vocal cords restructure to produce meows instead of words. His limbs retract. His eyes completely transform into a different organ with different functions. This goes beyond any normal biological response to a simple injection. Even if we accept that snail plasma could somehow affect a sponge, the completeness and speed of the transformation suggests SpongeBob's body is almost eager to take on these new characteristics, like it's designed to absorb and integrate foreign biological information. Think about what this means. SpongeBob's cells don't reject the snail characteristics. They don't fight the transformation. They embrace it completely, rewriting everything about him to match the new template. His body absorbs the snail plasma and uses it as instructions to become something entirely different. The original SpongeBob, his physical form, his ability to speak, his skeletal structure, everything that made him a sponge gets overwritten and replaced. The snail characteristics replace who he was. When SpongeBob arrives at Squidward's door as a snail, Squidward's reaction shows he understands something terrible has happened. Squidward screams in horror, runs inside, and boards up his doors and windows. But SpongeBob keeps getting in, meowing persistently. Squidward eventually gets injected with snail plasma too, and the episode ends with SpongeBob, Squidward, and Gary sitting on a fence together, all three of them singing in meows. Two of them are transformed beings who used to be something else entirely. The episode treats this as a temporary condition. Presumably SpongeBob and Squidward eventually turn back to normal, though we never see how. The show needs its characters to reset for the next episode. What the episode reveals about SpongeBob's fundamental biology remains deeply unsettling. His body can completely absorb and integrate characteristics from other species with terrifying efficiency. He becomes what he absorbs. The question this raises is whether SpongeBob's body might be doing this all the time, just more slowly and subtly, with the personalities and behaviors of everyone around him. If I Was a Teenage Gary shows SpongeBob's physical absorption abilities, Mimic Madness reveals the psychological side of this same disturbing pattern. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab, with Mr. Krabs giving a motivational speech to his crew. Squidward makes a mocking imitation of Mr. Krabs, copying his voice and mannerisms. Mr. Krabs catches him and gets angry, but Squidward quickly explains he wasn't insulting him. It was a tribute, because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Mr. Krabs accepts this explanation, even finding it complimentary. SpongeBob watches this interaction with growing interest. He realizes that imitating people makes them happy, that mimicry equals flattery equals joy. His eyes widen as he gets an idea, and from that moment, SpongeBob cannot stop himself from imitating everyone he encounters. SpongeBob starts small. A customer named Tom sits down with his kids, telling them to settle down and eat their patties. SpongeBob morphs his entire body to look like Tom and repeats his words in Tom's voice. The kids laugh, and Tom, despite initially looking angry, admits, "That's just like me," and laughs too. SpongeBob feels validated. He tried something and it worked. People enjoyed it. The imitations escalate quickly. Squidward asks SpongeBob to hurry up with an order, and SpongeBob morphs into Squidward's form, copying his body shape and voice to say, "Or never, whichever comes first." Everyone in the restaurant laughs. SpongeBob walks into the kitchen feeling euphoric, saying, "That imitation stuff really works." He morphs his face into a handsome man and declares in a dramatic voice that he's going to flatter your socks off. Outside, Patrick is digging through garbage when SpongeBob sneaks up behind him and morphs into Patrick's exact form. SpongeBob imitates Patrick's voice, saying he's going to eat ice cream and go jellyfishing with his good buddy SpongeBob. Patrick thinks he's talking to himself and goes along with it. When SpongeBob reveals the trick and morphs back to normal, Patrick laughs, but then says, "That's the worst SpongeBob impression I've ever seen," suggesting he still thinks he was talking to another Patrick doing a bad SpongeBob impression. The imitation was so perfect that Patrick couldn't distinguish the copy from himself. SpongeBob finds Sandy and Plankton playing chess. He morphs into Sandy's form, imitating her accent and mannerisms, then creates a second head that looks like Plankton and has them have a conversation with each other. Sandy loves it, saying SpongeBob nailed her to a Texas tea. Plankton grudgingly admits SpongeBob got his face right, though he criticizes the voice. SpongeBob has now reached the point where he can maintain two separate imitations simultaneously, essentially splitting his consciousness between two different identities. Here's where the episode shows us something crucial about SpongeBob's psychology. After successfully imitating several people, SpongeBob says, "Those impressions are making everyone so happy. I can't stop doing them. I can't. I won't." He's not choosing to continue. He's compulsive about it now. He morphs into Gary and meows, then morphs into the French narrator and imitates his voice to announce, 80,000 impressions later. The French narrator himself interrupts, annoyed, asking SpongeBob to please stop imitating him because it's getting very annoying. The time card tells us SpongeBob has done this 80,000 times. He's been imitating people constantly, obsessively, without stopping. This has gone far beyond trying to make people happy. SpongeBob has become addicted to mimicry, unable to stop himself even when people explicitly ask him to quit. When a customer asks for extra napkins, SpongeBob immediately mimics him, repeating the request in his voice. The customer screams at him to stop imitating and runs out of the restaurant. SpongeBob sighs and says, "Everybody still loves it," showing he's completely detached from reality, unable to see that people are becoming disturbed by his behavior. Squidward finally snaps. He sees SpongeBob morph into his form once again and says, "I can't stand the perfect impression of me anymore. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm tired of looking at myself. I quit." Squidward throws down his hat and walks out. SpongeBob's mimicry has become so accurate and so constant that Squidward literally cannot tolerate seeing himself reflected back at him repeatedly. Mr. Krabs recognizes what's happening. He tells Sandy that SpongeBob has lost touch with reality and that he's seen this before. They call it the mocking mimicry madness. The fact that there's a name for this condition suggests SpongeBob isn't the first person in Bikini Bottom to lose themselves in imitation. This is a recognized psychological phenomenon in their world. SpongeBob's friends stage an intervention. They show up at his house, and when SpongeBob opens the door, he immediately morphs his body to imitate all 5 of them at once. His body splits into 5 sections, each one looking like a different friend, each one speaking in their voice. Patrick screams, "Why?" in terror, because what he's seeing violates the basic rules of identity and selfhood. One being should not be able to become 5 beings simultaneously. Sandy tries to talk SpongeBob down, telling him it's okay to be yourself. SpongeBob responds by imitating all 5 friends, saying different variations of agreement, showing he's so far gone that he can't even have a normal conversation anymore. Sandy tells him to concentrate and try to come back to his normal self. SpongeBob takes a deep breath and struggles to revert. His body starts morphing uncontrollably through dozens of different forms. He becomes Gary, then Squidward, then Patrick, his body cycling through every imitation he's learned. Then SpongeBob says something revealing. As his face becomes completely deformed and unrecognizable, he cries out, "I can't do it! I'm a freak!" Then, in Plankton's voice, he repeats, "I'm a freak!" He's still imitating even in his moment of greatest distress, unable to express his own emotions in his own voice. SpongeBob runs out of his house crying, his body still shifting through various forms. SpongeBob hides in a dark cave, and the episode gives us a musical number that reveals the depth of his identity crisis. He morphs into an owl and asks, "Who am I?" He becomes a question mark. He becomes a pineapple. He becomes Pearl and says in her voice, "I just can't recall." Each transformation shows SpongeBob trying to figure out his own identity by cycling through everyone else he's absorbed. He morphs into a handsome man and sings, "When you've got 6 heads, there's something wrong." The song continues with SpongeBob begging for help. "Who am I? Please tell me, who am I? Do you know me?" He transforms into different random fish, asking if his name is Clementine or Freddy. He splits into 2 SpongeBobs who harmonize with each other. He morphs into his 5 friends and imitates them in a barbershop quintet. He cycles through every identity he knows, desperately searching for his own among the collection. The song ends with SpongeBob's face shriveling up, showing the psychological and physical toll this identity crisis is taking on him. When his friends find him, Sandy asks how many fingers she's holding up. SpongeBob morphs into the letter B, unable to process the question as himself. Sandy says, "I know you're in there somewhere, SquarePants," acknowledging that the real SpongeBob still exists, buried under all these copied identities, but he's become inaccessible. SpongeBob morphs into a telephone and delivers an automated message. "We're sorry, the person you are calling, SpongeBob SquarePants, has been disconnected or is no longer in service." This is the most disturbing moment in the episode. SpongeBob is telling his friends, through a metaphor, that his original self no longer exists. The line has been disconnected. The service is unavailable. You cannot reach the SpongeBob who used to live in this body, because that person is gone, replaced by an endless stream of everyone else. Sandy comes up with a plan. Since SpongeBob imitates whoever he hears, they all need to imitate SpongeBob to help him remember who he is. She paints everyone yellow and has them practice SpongeBob impressions. They say things like, "I'm a square and yellow critter. I like cooking with lard," and "Mr. Krabs is the best boss in the whole ocean." They're trying to remind SpongeBob of his defining characteristics by reflecting them back at him. The plan doesn't work at first. SpongeBob's body becomes even more distorted and chaotic. Sandy realizes they need to combine their efforts and all imitate SpongeBob simultaneously. They chant together, "I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready," over and over. This finally breaks through. SpongeBob's body stops morphing out of control and snaps back to his normal form. He joins the chant, then jumps in excitement, saying, "I remember. I know who I am. I am SpongeBob SquarePants." SpongeBob thanks his friends for saving him, noting that it feels great to just be yourself. But then he notices his friends are still imitating him, and they've caught the mocking mimicry madness themselves. They've all become SpongeBob, laughing in his voice, their bodies yellow and square. The episode ends with Squidward trapped inside his own imitation of SpongeBob. 2 tiny Squidwards appearing in the eyes of his SpongeBob form, banging on the inside and screaming, "Let me out!" The mocking mimicry madness is apparently contagious. By imitating SpongeBob to save him, his friends absorbed his condition. They lost themselves the same way he did. These 2 episodes together reveal a terrifying pattern in SpongeBob's biology and psychology. In I Was a Teenage Gary, we see that SpongeBob's physical body has an almost supernatural ability to absorb and integrate foreign biological characteristics. He becomes a snail, completely and totally, rewriting his entire physical structure in hours. In Mimic Madness, we see the same absorption pattern happening psychologically. SpongeBob absorbs their identities so completely that he loses track of his own, eventually reaching a point where SpongeBob SquarePants is no longer in service. Real sea sponges are filter feeders. They pull water through their bodies constantly, extracting nutrients and oxygen while filtering out everything else. SpongeBob might be doing the same thing with the people around him. Every conversation, every interaction, every shared moment could be SpongeBob pulling someone else's personality through his psychological filters, extracting pieces of their identity and incorporating those pieces into himself. Think about how SpongeBob behaves in the broader series. He's almost pathologically friendly and eager to please. He mirrors people's energy constantly. He adapts to whoever he's with, becoming more chaotic with Patrick, more enthusiastic with Sandy, more servile with Mr. Krabs, more annoying to Squidward. SpongeBob doesn't have consistent personality boundaries. He's permeable, absorbing and reflecting whatever's around him. The scary implication is that SpongeBob might not have a true core identity anymore. The cheerful, optimistic, hard-working fry cook we think of as SpongeBob could be a composite character. A little bit of Gary's loyalty, a little bit of Patrick's childlike enthusiasm, a little bit of Mr. Krabs' work ethic, a little bit of Sandy's can-do attitude, all mixed together with fragments from every customer he's ever served and every person he's ever met. The original SpongeBob, whoever that was, might have been completely overwritten years ago. This would explain SpongeBob's bizarre resistance to character development. Most characters in long-running shows either grow and change or remain static. SpongeBob does neither. He's constantly shifting but never developing. He learns lessons and immediately forgets them. He gains new skills and then inexplicably loses them. His personality seems to reset between episodes, but also shifts depending on who he's around. That makes perfect sense if SpongeBob has no stable identity to develop from. He's just a mirror reflecting whoever happens to be nearby, absorbing them temporarily before moving on to absorb someone else. The absorption theory also explains SpongeBob's unusual relationship with Gary. SpongeBob clearly loves Gary, and Gary loves him back, but their relationship has a strange intensity to it. In I Was a Teenage Gary, SpongeBob's transformation into a snail happens after he eats Gary's food and starts meowing. He's unconsciously mimicking Gary even before the transformation fully kicks in. SpongeBob spends more time with Gary than anyone else. He talks to Gary constantly. He treats Gary as his closest companion. If SpongeBob absorbs the traits of whoever he's around most, then Gary might make up the largest single component of SpongeBob's current personality. The loyalty, the simple needs, the contentment with routine, those might all be Gary's traits, absorbed and integrated so thoroughly that SpongeBob thinks they're his own. Mimic Madness shows us what happens when the absorption accelerates beyond SpongeBob's ability to process it. He takes in too many identities too quickly, and his sense of self completely collapses. The episode treats this as a temporary madness that can be cured. But think about the implications. SpongeBob needed his friends to forcibly remind him who he was by imitating him back. He couldn't remember on his own. The identity of SpongeBob SquarePants had to be reconstructed from the outside, fed back into him like data into a blank hard drive. What if this has happened before? What if SpongeBob has lost himself multiple times throughout his life, each time being put back together slightly differently by whoever happened to be around to help him? Each reconstruction would be based on how his friends perceive him, adding another layer of external definition to replace whatever internal identity might have existed originally. SpongeBob could be like a ship that's had every plank replaced one by one. At what point did it stop being the original ship? The most disturbing possibility is that SpongeBob might be vaguely aware of what's happening to him. In Mimic Madness, he says he can't stop and won't stop doing impressions, showing some level of recognition that he's lost control. His declaration that SpongeBob SquarePants has been disconnected or is no longer in service suggests he knows on some level that his original self is gone. Maybe SpongeBob's relentless cheerfulness and optimism serve as a defense mechanism against this knowledge. If he stops smiling, stops staying busy, stops filling every moment with activity and interaction, he might have to confront the terrifying question of whether there's actually anyone home behind those big blue eyes. The theory suggests we're not watching a character with a stable identity having adventures. We're watching an absorptive entity that consumes and integrates everything around it, creating the temporary illusion of personhood while having no true self underneath. SpongeBob SquarePants might be the most successful mimic in Bikini Bottom. So successful that he's fooled everyone, including himself, into believing the imitation is real. Real quick, if you're enjoying this, make sure you're subscribed. It's free and helps us keep these videos coming. Alright, let's keep going. If SpongeBob is a creature who's already lost his identity by absorbing everyone around him, then Patrick might be something even stranger. A being who still has his intelligence and is actively choosing to devolve. Real quick, if you're enjoying this, make sure you're subscribed. It's free and helps us keep these videos coming. Alright, let's keep going. Patrick. The reverse evolution theory. Patrick Star is the village idiot of Bikini Bottom. Everyone knows this. He lives under a rock. He can't hold a job. He struggles with basic tasks like opening jars or answering phones. And his best friend SpongeBob has to guide him through the simplest activities. Patrick represents pure, unfiltered stupidity. The kind of character who exists to make everyone else look smart by comparison. That's the surface reading anyway. The deeper you look at Patrick's behavior, the more disturbing patterns emerge that suggest something far stranger is happening. What if Patrick isn't actually stupid? What if he's experiencing a bizarre form of reverse evolution, becoming less intelligent as he ages? And what we're watching is a highly advanced being deliberately suppressing his own consciousness. This theory proposes that Patrick is, or was, a super-intelligent starfish whose evolution has taken a dark turn. Real starfish have remarkable regenerative abilities and decentralized nervous systems that allow them to function even when dismembered. Patrick takes this biology to an extreme, suggesting his species might have evolved far beyond normal starfish capabilities. The intelligence is still there, buried deep in his physiology, but something is actively suppressing it. The evidence shows a starfish who occasionally displays flashes of genius that completely contradict his established character, who can execute complex tasks flawlessly when motivated, and who might be playing the greatest long game in Bikini Bottom history by pretending to be exactly what everyone expects him to be. Patrick SmartPants gives us the most direct evidence for this theory by showing exactly what Patrick becomes when his normal state gets disrupted. The episode opens with SpongeBob and Patrick running through jellyfish fields, playing tag and trying to catch jellyfish. Patrick attempts to read a danger sign while running at full speed, sounds out, "Duh," and "grr," before crashing straight through it and falling off a cliff. SpongeBob rushes down to help and pulls what appears to be Patrick's head out of the ground. When SpongeBob realizes he's only holding the head with no body attached, he screams in horror. Patrick's body walks up without a head, completely unbothered. SpongeBob laughs in relief and reattaches Patrick's head to his body. The show gives us a cross-section view inside Patrick's head, showing the head plugging into his body like an electrical connection. Gears and cranks start up. Patrick gets a few sparks from his head as the systems reboot. Then Patrick speaks, and everything changes. His voice loses its usual dopey quality. He says, "I find all this laughter to be highly illogical." When a jellyfish floats by, instead of swinging wildly at it like the old Patrick would have done, this new Patrick observes it thoughtfully and says, "Look at them, these graceful, stoic creatures of the deep." SpongeBob comments on Patrick's unusual vocabulary, noting he's never heard Patrick use such big words before. Patrick responds, "Nonsense. My vocabulary is infinitely expanding, using precise grammar and sophisticated phrasing that the old Patrick would never have accessed." When SpongeBob captures a jellyfish and shows it to Patrick excitedly, Patrick pulls out a notebook containing a Leonardo da Vinci-style sketch of a jellyfish. He explains that he captured one as well without disturbing its delicate ecosystem, and declares that it's wrong to harness nature in such a barbaric manner. Patrick became a completely different type of intelligence. He's thinking about ethics, ecosystem preservation, artistic documentation, and philosophical questions about humanity's relationship with nature. These are complex, abstract concepts that require advanced cognitive abilities. The transformation happened instantly when his head reattached, suggesting that the intelligence was always present in Patrick's biology, just not activated or accessible in his normal configuration. The episode continues showing Patrick's abilities expand. When SpongeBob tries to get him to play games, Patrick asks if SpongeBob wants to run some statistics or observe phenomenon and render hypothesis of said phenomenon. Later, SpongeBob finds Patrick at his rock doing scientific work, studying specimens under a microscope. Even Plankton appears under Patrick's microscope and yells, "I'll show you, subspecies!" showing that Patrick's intelligence now rivals the established geniuses of Bikini Bottom. At Squidward's house, Patrick immediately identifies the clarinet piece as Cornelius Pufferfish's Opus 67, Symphony in Blue, demonstrating encyclopedic knowledge of classical music. He critiques Squidward's execution and suggests specific technical improvements. May I suggest on the 7th bar of the Adagio Andante that you add a little fortissimo on the arpeggiated B-flat scale. This is extraordinarily detailed musical knowledge, requiring understanding of notation, tempo markings, dynamics, and harmonic theory. The intelligence causes social problems. Patrick becomes condescending toward SpongeBob, calling him Robert, and telling him they've just grown apart and are not compatible anymore. When he visits Sandy and they work on mathematical equations together, Patrick corrects her formula and says, "Even the simplest of mammals can figure it out with a little thought." Sandy kicks him out, saying she liked him better when he was a barnacle head. Both Patrick and SpongeBob end up alone and miserable. Patrick sits in his rock, surrounded by knowledge, but with no one to share it with. He looks at a book titled My Friend SpongeBob and realizes something important is missing. He begins researching obsessively to figure out what changed, staying up until his eyes are bloodshot. Finally, he realizes the change happened when he fell off the cliff and lost his head. He decides to recreate the accident. Patrick deliberately jumps off the same cliff. When SpongeBob reattaches Patrick's head and he remains super intelligent, Patrick uses physics and geometry to explain where his original head should have landed. SpongeBob looks at the location Patrick indicated and realizes it's in a brain coral field. The episode reveals the critical piece. Patrick didn't reattach his original head after the first fall. He accidentally attached a piece of brain coral. That's why he became super intelligent. SpongeBob retrieves Patrick's actual original head and offers it to him, asking if he's sure he wants to give up being smart and sophisticated to be my friend again. Patrick responds with the most revealing line in the episode. "Knowledge can never replace friendship. I prefer to be an idiot." Patrick, in his fully intelligent state, makes a conscious choice to return to stupidity. He's aware that knowledge isolated him. He understands the social cost of being smart. He makes an informed decision to return to stupidity because the benefits of intelligence don't outweigh the benefits of connection. SpongeBob removes the brain coral head and reattaches Patrick's original head. Patrick burps and says, "Hi, SpongeBob," in his normal, dopey voice. The card provides completely different evidence for Patrick's hidden intelligence. Instead of showing Patrick becoming smart through an accident, this episode shows Patrick displaying sophisticated strategic thinking while maintaining his stupid persona. The setup involves a rare collectible card, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy talking card number 54, of which only 5 exist in the world. SpongeBob desperately wants this card, spending all his money buying pack after pack, but never finding it. Patrick casually buys the very last pack and gets card number 54. SpongeBob immediately recognizes what Patrick has and explains it's incredibly valuable. Patrick's response seems typically stupid. He uses the card to pick his teeth, completely oblivious to its worth. SpongeBob spends the rest of the episode in a panic, trying to protect the card from Patrick's careless behavior. Patrick walks toward a crack in the sidewalk, and SpongeBob rushes to move him away. Patrick approaches a mud puddle and SpongeBob throws himself in front of the mud to shield the card. Patrick walks straight into Goo Lagoon, and SpongeBob rescues him by carrying him through the water. Patrick wanders into a construction site and nearly falls into fire, causing SpongeBob to operate a crane and save him. The key detail is how consistently Patrick puts himself and the card in danger. He walks into Goo Lagoon despite being an air-breathing starfish who would drown. He walks toward fire. He uses precision movements to almost, but not quite, destroy the card over and over. When SpongeBob confronts him about potentially bending the card in his pocket, Patrick declares, "I don't even believe in pockets. I keep everything I need right here, in the folds of my back fat," pulling the card out completely undamaged. Patrick then asks if he can hold on to it, just for today. He immediately uses the card to pick the lock on his rock. He uses the card to scrape his dirty barbecue grill clean. He uses it like a match to light his charcoal. He uses it as a spatula to flip burgers. He serves the burgers on the card itself, getting melted cheese all over it. He wipes his face with the card like a napkin. By the end of dinner, the card has stopped working and disintegrates into black dust in SpongeBob's hand. SpongeBob breaks down crying, saying he'll never have card number 54 now. Patrick responds by reaching into his pants and pulling out 4 more copies of card number 54. All 4 cards activate simultaneously, their talking features working perfectly. Patrick explains, "Well, that one pack I bought was filled with them." He had all 5 of the rarest cards in existence the entire time. Patrick's behavior throughout makes perfect sense if he knew exactly what he was doing. Patrick buys the last pack. Patrick sees SpongeBob's reaction and understands the card is valuable. Patrick then proceeds to torture SpongeBob by seemingly endangering the card repeatedly while actually keeping it perfectly safe. Patrick uses the card for various tasks, all of which he could have done with literally any other object, while SpongeBob watches in horror. Patrick is running an elaborate psychological experiment or prank. He's testing SpongeBob's loyalty, his stress responses, how far SpongeBob will go to protect something he values. Patrick maintains perfect control the entire time. The card never actually gets destroyed until Patrick allows it to be destroyed at the exact moment when it's served its purpose. Then Patrick reveals he had backups all along and generously gives them all to SpongeBob. Think about the specific intelligence this requires. Patrick needs to understand rarity and value to know the cards are special. He needs to understand SpongeBob's psychology well enough to predict his reactions. He needs to execute a long-term plan that involves putting himself in seemingly dangerous situations while actually remaining in complete control. He needs timing, knowing exactly when to reveal the truth for maximum impact. The alternative explanation is that Patrick genuinely didn't understand the card's value and coincidentally damaged it in ways that looked intentional while coincidentally having 4 backup copies he forgot to mention. That requires assuming an impossible level of convenient coincidence. The simpler explanation is that Patrick knew exactly what he was doing and was messing with SpongeBob deliberately. Big Pink Loser provides the third piece of evidence by showing Patrick's ability to perfectly replicate complex behaviors when motivated. The episode begins with Patrick receiving an award by mistake. It's actually for SpongeBob. When Patrick discovers the award isn't for him, he becomes devastated, crying that he's never gonna get an award because I've never done anything. SpongeBob gets Patrick a job at the Krusty Krab. Patrick tries various tasks and fails at all of them. He eats orders instead of delivering them. He can't answer the phone correctly, repeatedly telling callers, "No, this is Patrick," when they ask if they've reached the Krusty Krab. He sweeps with the handle end of the broom. He can't even open a jar lid, despite extensive coaching from SpongeBob. The next morning, Patrick shows up at SpongeBob's house, dressed exactly like SpongeBob. Square yellow pants, red tie, white shirt. When SpongeBob comments on this, Patrick explains, "If I'm gonna be an award winner, I've gotta dress like one." From that point forward, Patrick copies everything SpongeBob does. He repeats SpongeBob's words verbatim. He mirrors SpongeBob's movements exactly. At the grill, they both whistle, "Row, row, row your boat," in perfect unison. They both wipe their foreheads at the same time. When SpongeBob drops his spatula and bends down to pick it up, Patrick does exactly the same. They both remove their hats and put them back on simultaneously. The copying extends to thoughts. Both SpongeBob and Patrick think, "At least I'm safe inside my mind," at the exact same moment, then realize even their internal thoughts are synchronized. They scream and run out of the Krusty Krab together. SpongeBob tries to prove he's superior by demonstrating he's the jump rope champion of Bikini Bottom, doing a complex move that ends with his body breaking into pieces. Patrick successfully replicates this. They escalate to hitting themselves in the head with hammers repeatedly. Patrick reveals he used to do this way before I started copying you, suggesting this level of behavior is normal for him. Patrick can execute perfect mimicry when he chooses to. Every movement SpongeBob makes, Patrick can replicate exactly. Every word SpongeBob says, Patrick can repeat with perfect timing. Even SpongeBob's thoughts sync with Patrick's. This requires extraordinary processing speed, physical coordination, and cognitive ability. The episode shows Patrick is capable of learning and executing complex tasks. The question is why Patrick normally fails at these same tasks. The answer the episode provides is motivation. When Patrick wants to copy SpongeBob to win an award, he can do it. When Patrick is just being asked to do work, he fails. The episode ends with Patrick receiving an award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. Patrick immediately goes to protect my title by lying on his rock and falling asleep. He's found the perfect award, one that rewards him for his lifestyle of doing nothing. Looking at these three episodes together reveals a consistent pattern. Patrick has access to extraordinary intelligence when his brain is enhanced with coral. Patrick can execute sophisticated psychological manipulation while maintaining a stupid persona. Patrick can perform perfect mimicry of complex behaviors when motivated. The theory proposes that Patrick is experiencing reverse evolution. Real starfish have decentralized nervous systems. They don't have a single brain, but rather a network of nerves distributed throughout their body. Patrick seems to have evolved beyond this, developing a centralized brain in his head, but that brain might be actively suppressing itself. The Patrick Smart Pants episode shows that when Patrick's head functions with brain coral instead of his original tissue, he becomes super intelligent. This suggests his original head contains something that limits intelligence. Why would evolution create a mechanism that makes organisms dumber over time? High intelligence creates high stress. Smart Patrick is lonely, condescending, and socially isolated. Dumb Patrick has friends, enjoys simple pleasures, and wins awards for doing nothing. From a pure survival standpoint, Dumb Patrick is more successful. The darkest possibility is that Patrick is deliberately choosing stupidity. The end of Patrick Smart Pants supports this. When given the choice between intelligence and friendship, Patrick explicitly chooses to prefer to be an idiot. He's aware that knowledge isolated him. He makes an informed decision to return to stupidity because the benefits of intelligence don't outweigh the benefits of connection. If Patrick can make that choice once, he can make it continuously. What if Patrick wakes up every morning with full intelligence and consciously decides to suppress it? What if maintaining his stupid persona is actually the most sophisticated long-term strategy Patrick could employ? He avoids responsibility, attracts caretaking from SpongeBob, wins awards for doing nothing, and lives a stress-free life under a rock. Smart Patrick understood this immediately. When he became intelligent, he didn't find better housing or get a high-paying job. He studied science and music, insulted his friends, and ended up completely alone. Intelligence gave him knowledge, but took away everything that made life worth living. Within 24 hours, Smart Patrick was desperate to return to his previous state. Patrick might be the most self-aware character in the entire show. SpongeBob lives in denial about Mr. Krabs' exploitation. Squidward refuses to accept his artistic limitations. But Patrick knows exactly who he is and what he wants. He wants to do nothing, win awards for it, eat ice cream, and hang out with his best friend. He's achieved all of these goals. If Patrick is playing dumb deliberately, he's running the longest and most successful con in Bikini Bottom. He's convinced everyone, including the audience, that he's an idiot. He's built an entire life around this persona. He's protected himself from expectations, responsibilities, and the crushing weight of consciousness that smart Patrick experienced. Patrick Star might be the most highly evolved being in Bikini Bottom. He's transcended the need to prove his intelligence. He's beyond the stress of achievement. He's found contentment in simplicity. Knowledge can never replace friendship. Patrick knows this. The question is whether he's always known it, or whether he has to relearn it every time his intelligence accidentally activates. If Patrick chose ignorance to survive, and Squidward created a whole world to avoid being alone, then the next character shows what happens when someone tries to control reality itself and fails. Squidward, the solitary consciousness theory. Squidward, Tentacles hates his life. Everyone knows this. He's miserable at work, tormented by his neighbors, and constantly denied the artistic recognition he desperately craves. His clarinet playing is mocked, his paintings are rejected, and his dreams of sophistication are crushed daily by the chaotic stupidity surrounding him. That's the standard interpretation of Squidward's character, the grumpy realist suffering through an absurd world. The theory goes deeper and darker. What if Squidward isn't experiencing an absurd world? What if there is no world at all? What if Squidward is the only conscious being in Bikini Bottom, and everything else, SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, the customers, the entire town, are hallucinations created by his isolated, fracturing mind? This theory proposes that Squidward suffered a psychotic break at some point in his past and has been living inside his own mental construct ever since. The reality of Bikini Bottom is actually Squidward's psychosis, manifesting as a coherent but impossible world populated by projections of his own psychology. SpongeBob represents his suppressed optimism and joy. Patrick embodies his fear of stupidity and meaninglessness. Mr. Krabs is his anxiety about money and survival. Every character is a fragment of Squidward's fractured consciousness, externalized and given form. The evidence appears in episodes where reality itself breaks down around Squidward in ways that suggest he's perceiving something fundamentally different from everyone else. Squidward in Clarinet Land provides the most disturbing evidence by showing reality literally falling apart when Squidward enters a space alone. The episode begins with Squidward in an unusually good mood, excited because he has a clarinet recital after work. He declares that nothing's gonna ruin my day. Mr. Krabs gives Squidward a personal locker to share with SpongeBob after Squidward points out that labor regulations require secure storage for employees. SpongeBob cleans the old Navy locker until it sparkles. When Squidward opens the locker later, he finds the interior has been impossibly expanded. The small locker now contains a vast space with filing cabinets and elaborate organizational systems. This violates basic physics. The locker is bigger on the inside than the outside. Squidward enters looking for his clarinet and follows SpongeBob's filing system deeper into the space. What started as a locker becomes a labyrinth of corridors and rooms. Squidward crawls through a small hole and emerges in a forest made entirely of clarinets. This is where reality completely abandons coherent rules. The trees are giant clarinets. His own clarinet jumps in front of him and escapes in SpongeBob's hands. A massive talking eagle head with no body appears and identifies itself as the keeper of the horned forest. The eagle interrogates Squidward, telling him a clarinet is not owned and demanding his real purpose. When Squidward insists he wants his clarinet back, the eagle grabs him with its tongue and swallows him whole. Squidward ends up inside the eagle's stomach, sees SpongeBob laughing, chases him, and falls into a room surrounded by mirrors. Twisted versions of himself appear in the mirrors. Mirror Squidward laughs wickedly, grabs a clarinet, and shoves the entire instrument into his mouth. Multiple mirror Squidwards begin playing their clarinets simultaneously, producing high-pitched notes that blast directly at Squidward's ears, causing him to scream in agony. Squidward runs through increasingly surreal environments, running on giant clarinets, falling through clarinet holes into a pinball machine where Patrick waits, somehow giant-sized. Patrick says, "I win," and grabs Squidward. When asked how he got so big, Patrick cryptically responds, "Must be all the pressure." Squidward gets sucked into a vacuum that explodes, sending him into space. Finally, the locker opens, and Squidward melts out, completely traumatized. SpongeBob reveals he had the clarinet with him the whole time, kept safe because Squidward was making such a fuss. None of the impossible reality Squidward experienced was necessary. The clarinet was never in the locker. Everything Squidward experienced violated the normal rules of SpongeBob's universe. The show has cartoon logic. Characters survive explosions and defy gravity temporarily. What happens in the locker goes beyond cartoon logic into pure surrealism. The eagle with no body. The forest of living clarinets. The mirror selves that weaponize music. These aren't cartoon gags, they're dream logic, nightmare imagery that only makes sense as psychological experiences rather than physical events. Squidward was the only one who experienced any of this. SpongeBob was organizing filing systems, mundane, logical tasks. Squidward was being swallowed by eagles and tortured by evil versions of himself. Two people entered the same space, but only one experienced reality breakdown. That suggests the breakdown was internal to Squidward, a manifestation of his psychological state. The clarinet forest is particularly revealing. Squidward's entire identity centers on his clarinet, his artistic expression, his connection to high culture, his escape from the Krusty Krab. When Squidward enters a space alone and anxious about protecting this object, his mind creates a world made of what he values most. The eagle telling him a clarinet is not owned is Squidward's own doubt externalized, his fear that he doesn't truly possess talent, that his playing is pretension rather than skill. The mirror Squidwards represent his self-hatred. They play the instrument he loves and turn it into a weapon against him, showing him perverted versions of himself. Patrick's appearance makes no sense unless Patrick is a projection representing Squidward's awareness that none of this is real. All the pressure is the psychological pressure of maintaining the hallucination. SB129 shows Squidward experiencing time as a flexible construct. The episode begins with Squidward trying to play clarinet while SpongeBob interrupts, repeatedly asking about jellyfishing. After dozens of interruptions, Squidward flees to the Krusty Krab and locks himself in the freezer. The door locks from the inside, trapping him. He assumes someone will find him soon. The narrator announces 2,000 years later. Squidward is frozen in ice. A robot called Spongetron finds him and melts the ice. Spongetron welcomes him to the future, where everything is chrome. Spongetron has 486 clones. A two-headed Patron appears. Squidward panics and uses a time machine to travel to the past. He arrives in primitive Bikini Bottom with primate sponge and prehistoric starfish. They're even more annoying than their future counterparts. When Squidward tries to play clarinet, they torture themselves with a jellyfish every time he plays a note. Frustrated, Squidward invents jellyfishing for them, creating the very activity that will torment him in his own time. Squidward tries returning to the present, but breaks the time machine's lever. The machine goes haywire, sending him through impossible dimensions before depositing him in a white void called nowhere. This space contains nothing, just whiteness. The word alone repeats endlessly in different voices as the frame gets smaller and smaller, trapping Squidward in infinite recursive isolation. Squidward screams that he wants to go home and sobs that he misses Bikini Bottom, his house, and even SpongeBob. The moment he says SpongeBob's name, the time machine returns him to the present, exactly where he left. SpongeBob and Patrick are still waiting. They ask if he wants to go jellyfishing. When Squidward asks who invented that game, they remind him, You are Squidward. This episode reveals critical details about Squidward's relationship to reality. He's the only character who experiences time travel while maintaining continuity of self. Every time period contains versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, Spongetron and Pattron in the future, Primate Sponge and prehistoric starfish in the past. They exist in every era, always tormenting Squidward. This suggests they're not independent beings evolving naturally. They're constants in Squidward's experience, manifestations that appear regardless of when or where he exists. Squidward creates what torments him. By inventing jellyfishing in the past, he establishes the activity that ruins his future. This closed time loop only makes sense if Squidward is the central axis around which time revolves, traveling through his own psychological construct, where past and future are extensions of his present consciousness. The nowhere dimension represents the complete collapse of Squidward's reality construction abilities. When the time machine breaks, Squidward ends up in a space with no structure, no objects, no beings, just void and the word alone echoing infinitely. This is what exists underneath Squidward's hallucinated world. When the constructed reality fails, there's nothing, just Squidward, isolated in his own consciousness. Squidward escapes by mentioning SpongeBob. The time machine responds to that name and immediately returns him to Bikini Bottom. This suggests SpongeBob is the anchor of Squidward's constructed reality. When Squidward admits he misses SpongeBob, when he acknowledges his need for the projection, the hallucination restabilizes. Are you happy now? Shows Squidward's mental state directly affecting his environment. SpongeBob asks Squidward about his happiest memory. Squidward tries to think of one, and the show provides a visual representation. TV static, then color bars, then nothing. Squidward has no happiest memory. SpongeBob becomes distressed and promises to help create one. They try multiple activities, concerts, art museums, hot air balloons, but each fails catastrophically. Squidward returns home declaring he'll never have a happiest memory and goes to bed saying, "Wake me when I'm dead." He doesn't emerge for 2 weeks. SpongeBob tries contacting Squidward, but fails repeatedly. He knocks on the door with no answer. He calls, but Squidward throws his phone out the window. SpongeBob emerges from Squidward's fax machine in paper form. Squidward puts him through a paper shredder and dumps the pieces outside. SpongeBob mails himself in a box. When Squidward opens it, the box appears empty. Squidward says, "It's empty, empty, just like my miserable life." SpongeBob emerges and takes Squidward to a surprise party at the Krusty Krab. The entire restaurant is filled with hundreds of papier-mâché SpongeBobs, since everyone SpongeBob invited was busy or sick. Squidward snaps. Angry skulls appear in his eyes, repeating his words. He goes berserk, destroying everything, ripping apart papier-mâché SpongeBobs, sawing them in half, crawling on the ceiling, swinging from banners. He systematically demolishes every papier-mâché SpongeBob while declaring, "This is it, my happiest memory." SpongeBob smiles and says, "He's so handsome." When Squidward tries to access a happy memory, he literally sees static and color bars, the technical error screen when a television receives no signal. This suggests Squidward's mind is searching for content that doesn't exist, experiencing memory as technical malfunction. When Squidward becomes depressed, the world becomes inaccessible. SpongeBob can't reach him through normal means. He must use increasingly absurd methods, fax machines, mailing himself, to make contact. Physical space resists SpongeBob's attempts until Squidward is psychologically ready to engage. The party filled with papier-mâché SpongeBobs represents Squidward's psychological state made visible. This is what Squidward's world looks like from inside his head. SpongeBob everywhere, inescapable, multiplied infinitely, filling every space with the same irritating presence. Squidward's violent breakdown is portrayed as positive development, as his happiest memory forming. This makes sense if SpongeBob is Squidward's projection. By destroying the papier-mâché versions, Squidward symbolically destroys externalized emotions and reclaims them as his own. He's integrating fragmented parts of his psyche through violent catharsis. These 3 episodes reveal a consistent pattern. Squidward's psychological state directly determines reality's structure. In Squidward and Clarinet Land, his anxiety transforms a locker into a nightmare dimension filled with symbolic insecurities. In SB-129, his desire to escape creates time travel, but every period contains the same tormenting presences. In Are You Happy Now?, his depression manifests as a literal void where memories should be. The theory proposes that Squidward suffered a psychotic break and created Bikini Bottom as a coping mechanism. Every character represents a specific part of his psychology made external. SpongeBob is his suppressed optimism and joy. Patrick is his fear of stupidity and meaninglessness. Mr. Krabs is his anxiety about survival and money. Every character is Squidward arguing with himself. The clarinet represents who he was before the break, a musician, an artist with dreams. When reality breaks down in Squidward in Clarinet Land, it happens because Squidward went looking for himself and discovered there's nothing there anymore, just void and projections. The time travel reveals Squidward's awareness of existing across multiple states of consciousness. The future represents his fear of eternal continuation, that this will never end, that SpongeBob will multiply infinitely. The past represents his search for the origin, trying to find when the psychosis began. The nowhere dimension is what exists underneath. Nothing. Just Squidward alone, with the word alone echoing forever. He escapes by saying SpongeBob's name, because SpongeBob is the primary anchor, the most elaborate hallucination that holds everything together. When Squidward admits he needs the projection, the hallucination restarts. He can't tolerate the void. Are You Happy Now? Shows what happens when Squidward briefly gives up maintaining the hallucination. He stays in bed for 2 weeks. SpongeBob, Squidward's externalized optimism, tries desperately to reach him, fighting to pull him back into the constructed reality where at least things happen. Squidward is trapped in a prison of his own making. He created Bikini Bottom to cope with unbearable isolation, but he designed it to torture him because he believes that's what he deserves. SpongeBob is optimism twisted into irritation. Patrick is stupidity elevated to horror. Mr. Krabs is greed personified. Every character is Squidward's self-hatred given autonomous form. Reality remains stable only when Squidward accepts the hallucination and stops trying to escape. When he commits to the constructed world, the rules become consistent. But the moment Squidward tries to be alone, to play his clarinet in peace, to travel away from his tormentors, to exist without engagement, reality breaks down catastrophically and reveals itself as psychological construct rather than physical truth. Squidward is the only real character in Bikini Bottom. Everyone else is symptoms of his psychosis, fragments of his shattered mind given form. Bikini Bottom is just Squidward's consciousness, and he's aware of this on some terrible level, which explains his profound misery. He knows he's alone. He knows it's all projection. He just can't stop creating the world that tortures him because the alternative, true awareness of absolute isolation, confronting the void directly, would destroy what little remains of his sanity. So he maintains the hallucination, suffers through it, and occasionally glimpses the terrible truth when reality breaks down and shows him what's really there. Nothing. Just Squidward, alone forever, creating and destroying his own prison in an endless cycle he can never escape. If Squidward shows what isolation does to a mind, and Mr. Krabs shows what guilt does to a soul, then the next character reveals what happens when obsession becomes the only thing keeping someone alive. And real quick, don't forget to subscribe. It's free and helps us keep improving these videos. Now, let's get back into it. Mr. Krabs, the guilt-driven tyrant. Mr. Krabs loves money. Everyone knows this. He underpays his employees, overcharges his customers, and obsesses over every single penny that enters the Krusty Krab. The show plays this for laughs most of the time, treating Mr. Krabs' cheapness as a harmless character quirk. The theory goes darker. What if Mr. Krabs' obsession with money comes from deep psychological guilt? What if his paranoia, his cruelty, and his relentless greed are all manifestations of unresolved trauma and terrible things he's done in his past? The evidence appears in episodes where Mr. Krabs literally goes to hell and is judged for his sins, where he demonstrates a capacity for psychological torture that drives someone to suicide, and where the origin of his fortune reveals suspicious circumstances he's been hiding for decades. This theory proposes that Mr. Krabs has committed genuinely terrible acts throughout his life, acts that go far beyond normal cartoon villainy into genuine moral darkness. His relationship with money serves as a coping mechanism, a way to measure his worth and justify his existence after doing things he can never take back. The Krabby Patty formula represents something more sinister than a simple recipe. It's connected to betrayal, greed, and the destruction of his only real friendship. Every penny he hoards, every employee he exploits, every customer he overcharges adds to a mountain of guilt he can never escape. The evidence shows a crab who's been judged by cosmic forces and found wanting, who's willing to drive others to death for profit, and whose past contains secrets dark enough that even he tries to rewrite the story. Born-Again Krabs provides the most direct evidence that Mr. Krabs has committed sins serious enough to damn his soul. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab during evening closing time. SpongeBob is crying because closing time is the saddest time of the day. While cleaning, he finds an old Krabby Patty stuck under the grill with gum. The patty is cold and hard, clearly ancient. SpongeBob comments that it could have rolled under there years ago and tosses it in the trash. An alarm immediately goes off. A fishing line retrieves the patty from the trash. Mr. Krabs runs in and demands to know who tried to throw away a patty. A device called the Pinch-O-Matic announces it has saved you 5.2 cents. Mr. Krabs takes the disgusting old patty and hands it to SpongeBob, declaring that tomorrow a customer will find it under his bun. SpongeBob protests that the patty is old and cold and so very full of mold. Mr. Krabs orders SpongeBob to serve that patty and make no new ones until the moldy one is sold. The next day, SpongeBob serves the patty to Squidward, who calls it the foggy patty because of the visible mold and fog emanating from it. Flies buzz around it. Squidward tries to serve it to a customer named Gus, who screams in disgust and backflips his way out of the restaurant. Mr. Krabs stands by the door confused, noting they haven't had a customer in weeks and wondering if it's the new placemats causing the problem. Squidward explodes in frustration, pointing out the obvious. The old patty has gone bad and is driving customers away. Mr. Krabs refuses to believe this. He demands they bring the patty to him. SpongeBob brings it in a cage because it growled at me. The patty is now sentient and starts growling and barking like a rabid dog. Mr. Krabs dismisses their concerns, saying they would have never lasted in the Navy. Mr. Krabs takes the patty out of its cage while it continues to bark and growl at him. He throws a treat into its mouth to calm it down, pats it gently, and declares it good enough to eat. As he's about to take a bite, an ambulance drives by. Mr. Krabs looks at it, then continues eating the patty anyway. The scene immediately cuts to Mr. Krabs moaning, now green in color from severe food poisoning, being rolled on a gurney into a hospital. Even while being hospitalized, Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to make sure you wrap up that patty. I'm not finished with it yet. His greed extends even to his deathbed. He still wants to sell the poison that nearly killed him. At the hospital, a purple doctor checks Mr. Krabs' chart. The doctor's expression changes from professional to horrified. He starts shaking, drops the clipboard, and screams, "Oh no, this is terrible!" When Mr. Krabs asks if everything is okay, the doctor screams, "Don't touch me!" and runs out of the room screaming in terror. Whatever the doctor saw on that chart was so disturbing that a medical professional fled rather than treat the patient. Thunder roars as the room turns green. The Flying Dutchman, the show's equivalent of death and demonic judgment, appears. Mr. Krabs pulls the covers over his head in fear. The Flying Dutchman announces, "Eugene Krabs, your time has come." Mr. Krabs tries to lie, claiming he's Harold Flower. The Flying Dutchman briefly leaves to check with a nurse, realizes the deception, and returns in anger. The Flying Dutchman declares he's there to escort Mr. Krabs to the resting place of all bad undersea folk, Davy Jones's locker. Mr. Krabs protests, asking why he has to go there and claiming he's a good crab. The Flying Dutchman responds with a devastating indictment. "Ah, you were cheap, and being cheap is a terrible thing." This is critical. The Flying Dutchman, a supernatural entity who judges souls, has determined that Mr. Krabs' cheapness rises to the level of moral sin worthy of eternal damnation. This goes beyond normal greed. The Flying Dutchman wouldn't condemn someone to hell for simply being frugal. Mr. Krabs' cheapness must have caused genuine harm, genuine suffering, genuine evil. The Flying Dutchman takes Mr. Krabs to Davy Jones's locker, which smells foul because Davy Jones works out a lot, and the locker contains his smelly gym socks. The Flying Dutchman orders Mr. Krabs to get inside. Mr. Krabs falls to his knees crying, begging for another chance, screaming, "Mommy!" in desperation. The Flying Dutchman agrees to give him one more chance, stating he must always be generous, never cheap. Mr. Krabs returns to life and initially tries to reform. He reopens the Krusty Krab with free toys, free refills, in-meal movies, and generous policies. He gives employees paid breaks. He spends money freely on customer satisfaction. He quickly goes bankrupt. When Mr. Krabs realizes he's actually awake and this is really happening, he screams in horror. His head cracks open repeatedly, each time revealing a new screaming head underneath. Mr. Krabs immediately reverts to extreme cheapness. He confiscates refills by literally vacuuming soda back out of cups and into the machine. He steals toys from children. He turns off a customer's movie and uses a device to erase the man's memory of what he watched. When another customer reaches for a penny on the ground, Mr. Krabs grabs his arm and threatens, "Unhand that penny or the arm comes off." He's willing to physically maim someone over 1 cent. The Flying Dutchman reappears, declaring that this little display of parsimonious penny pinching just earned you a nice little spot in Davy Jones's locker for eternity. Squidward confirms Mr. Krabs almost tore a man's arm off for a penny. Mr. Krabs accepts his fate and prepares to leave. SpongeBob intervenes, defending Mr. Krabs as the most generous, big-hearted crab in the whole sea. The Flying Dutchman responds, "He'd sell your soul for a couple of bucks." SpongeBob bets his own soul that Mr. Krabs would never do that. The Flying Dutchman accepts the bet and presents Mr. Krabs with a choice: SpongeBob or 62 cents. Mr. Krabs asks how much money they're talking about. When told 62 cents, he responds, "I'll take the money." He trades SpongeBob's soul, his best employee, his most loyal friend, someone who just risked eternal damnation to defend him, for pocket change. The Flying Dutchman takes SpongeBob to hell. Mr. Krabs briefly celebrates having money, then Squidward shames him. Mr. Krabs breaks down crying, throwing the money on the ground and begging for SpongeBob back. The Flying Dutchman returns SpongeBob, explaining that having SpongeBob in hell for just 30 seconds was a fate worse than death, because SpongeBob talked constantly about jellyfishing and Mermaid Man. This episode reveals several disturbing truths about Mr. Krabs. First, a literal cosmic judge of souls has determined Mr. Krabs deserves hell. Second, Mr. Krabs' cheapness has caused enough harm throughout his life to warrant eternal punishment. Third, even when given a second chance and explicitly told to reform, Mr. Krabs cannot control his greed. He immediately reverts to violence and exploitation. Fourth, Mr. Krabs will betray anyone, even people who love him, for trivial amounts of money. Fifth, Mr. Krabs only shows remorse when faced with consequences, never from genuine moral development. The episode treats Mr. Krabs' damnation as justified. The Flying Dutchman is portrayed as correct in his judgment. One-course meal demonstrates the depths of Mr. Krabs' cruelty by showing him deliberately driving Plankton to suicidal desperation through systematic psychological torture. The episode opens with Mr. Krabs in his office, bathing in money while listening to music. He smells something burning. SpongeBob identifies it as a high-grade explosive. Plankton is flying on a glider outside, laughing as he activates a bomb that blows up the Krusty Krab's roof. Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob fight back against Plankton's attack, using peas as ammunition and various defenses. Plankton fires a missile that transforms into a robotic arm and squeezes them. Plankton demands the secret formula. Mr. Krabs refuses. Plankton tickles Mr. Krabs with a feather, then threatens SpongeBob. SpongeBob accidentally reveals the formula is hidden in the safe behind the painting in Mr. Krabs' office. Pearl arrives at the Krusty Krab, and Plankton's demeanor immediately changes to terror. He screams, "Call off your daughter, Krabs! Call her off!" He backs away in panic, screaming about documentaries he's seen about what whales do to organisms like him. He runs into the freezer, then exits and flees the restaurant completely. Mr. Krabs notices this fear and chuckles evilly. He realizes Plankton was so afraid of whales and immediately sees this as an opportunity. He tells Pearl she saved his business and his formula by scaring Plankton. Mr. Krabs asks Pearl to swing by the chum bucket on her way to the mall to give Plankton a scare. This is where Mr. Krabs' cruelty becomes calculated and deliberate. When Pearl refuses unless he doubles her mall money, Mr. Krabs has a different idea. He says, "In that case, Pearl, I'm gonna need to borrow one of your dresses." The scene cuts to the chum bucket, where Plankton runs inside. Karen asks how he failed this time. Plankton says, "Krabs had a whale." Karen mocks him, asking, "You mean his big, bad, scary teenage daughter?" Plankton explains that whales killed his ancestors, and we see a flashback of Plankton's family being eaten by a whale. This establishes that Plankton's fear comes from genuine trauma. His entire family line has been hunted and consumed by whales. This is deep psychological terror based on generational genocide. Karen dismisses his fear as delusional paranoia and tells him to take out the trash. While Plankton is outside at the dumpster, Mr. Krabs emerges wearing Pearl's dress and a whale costume. He yells, "I'm hungry!" Plankton screams and runs back inside, barring the door. Mr. Krabs sneaks into the laboratory and breathes heavily behind Plankton, saying, "I want plankton meat!" Plankton runs to Karen, screaming that there's a whale in the laboratory. Karen checks and finds nothing. Plankton insists he saw a whale, right here in this spot, her mouth all frothy, her blowhole blowing. Karen dismisses him and rolls away. The narrator announces 16 paranoia-filled days later. The scene shows Plankton sitting in a chair with long gray hair, a long beard, long fingernails, and boxes of tissues on his feet as shoes. He's completely deteriorated from psychological trauma. He tells Karen he can't risk stepping into the light because the whale might see me. He starts crying. The camera zooms out to show Mr. Krabs in the whale costume watching through the window, laughing at Plankton's suffering. That night, Plankton has a nightmare about being chased by Pearl and falling into her blowhole, landing in her mouth. He bangs on her teeth, begging to be released. Pearl laughs evilly and flings him into her throat with her tongue. Plankton falls into her stomach, where he finds his ancestors. His granddad says, "Glad you could join the rest of the family," and warns him he's standing in gastric acid. Plankton's body is half burned, and he screams. Plankton wakes up screaming, "I can't take it! This is driving me crazy!" Mr. Krabs takes off his disguise and laughs sadistically at Plankton's mental breakdown. The next morning, Plankton is lying in the middle of the road. He tells SpongeBob, "I'm trying to get run over," and asks SpongeBob to step on him as hard as he can. Plankton explains he's waiting for the 4:15 bus to run him over. He's actively attempting suicide. SpongeBob refuses to help with the suicide and returns to the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs is in his office erasing a picture of Plankton, symbolically eliminating him. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs that Plankton is lying in the street forlorn. Mr. Krabs gasps with excitement, declaring, "He's a mess!" and laughing at Plankton's suicidal state. SpongeBob confronts Mr. Krabs, pointing out that putting on a dress to frighten him is taking it a little too far. This is a critical moment. Even SpongeBob, who's usually oblivious to wrongdoing, recognizes this as excessive cruelty. Mr. Krabs dismisses the concern by reminding SpongeBob that he disclosed the safe location. This episode demonstrates Mr. Krabs' capacity for genuine evil. He deliberately exploited Plankton's deepest trauma, a fear based on his family being killed by whales, for entertainment and competitive advantage. He systematically tortured Plankton for 16 days, watching him deteriorate mentally until Plankton became suicidal. Mr. Krabs laughed at Plankton's suffering and celebrated when Plankton attempted suicide. He showed zero remorse until he faced consequences himself. The episode reveals that Mr. Krabs understands psychological warfare and deliberately employs it. He's willing to drive someone to death through extended mental torture. He finds joy in others' suffering. He views Plankton's suicide attempt as a victory worth celebrating. This goes far beyond business rivalry into sadistic cruelty that reveals Mr. Krabs' true capacity for evil. Friend or Foe reveals the origin of the Krabby Patty formula and Mr. Krabs' relationship with Plankton, showing how greed destroyed their friendship and created the foundation for Mr. Krabs' empire. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab, with Plankton attempting to steal the formula using an elaborate birthday cake bomb. The plan fails and Plankton escapes, yelling, "You'll rue the day we were born, Krabs." SpongeBob asks, "Why does he hate us so?" Mr. Krabs sits down and reveals, "There was a time when Plankton and I were best friends." Everyone gasps. Mr. Krabs explains, "Friends at birth, you might say," and the flashback begins, showing baby Krabs and baby Plankton, born on the same date, November 30th, 1942. They're shown as toddlers celebrating birthdays together and going through elementary school as inseparable companions. At school, young Plankton is bullied relentlessly. A kid named Billy shoots spitballs at him and calls him Mr. Brainatron 5000. Billy stuffs Plankton into a straw and blows him out like a spitball, splattering him into young Mr. Krabs' eye. Plankton says, "They'll pay for this one day, Eugene." Young Krabs tries to defend Plankton, but the bullies mock Krabs for getting his clothes from the trash. They call him Rag Boy and laugh at his poverty. The flashback shows Krabs' mother sewing clothes from rags because times were tough. Old Man Jenkins rips the clothes off Krabs to use as a washcloth, leaving Krabs walking around in a box. One day, young Krabs finds a penny on the ground and asks, "What is it?" Plankton explains, "It's money. You can buy things with it." Mr. Krabs is amazed by this concept. He spends the penny on a balloon for Plankton, but because Plankton is so light, the balloon makes him fly away into the sky. This shows their friendship was genuine. Krabs' first experience with money involved spending it on his friend. The story continues at a place called Stinky Burgers, the only burger place in town. Stinky is beloved by the kids. When Krabs and Plankton try to order, Stinky makes weird shocked faces and tells them, "If it's burgers you want, go around back." He explains to the other kids that without their kind patronage, I'd be a penniless loser like Rag Boy. Stinky opens the back door and tells Krabs and Plankton that if they keep coming around, you'll drive away all the normal customers. Stinky claims he can barely afford the essential things in life, then rips off his clothes to reveal nice clothes underneath, gets in a limousine, and drives away to enjoy luxuries. A dollar flies into Mr. Krabs' hand. Plankton notices that by cooking burgers, Stinky gained the other kids' respect. Mr. Krabs notices Stinky's fat stack of loot and realizes if someone made a better burger, they'd have a fatter stack of loot. This is the moment money becomes an obsession. Krabs sees it as the solution to all the humiliation and poverty he's endured. Mr. Krabs claims he and Plankton work together in secret at the dump to create a burger. They keep careful record of their progress and eventually create the best-looking burger under the sea. They return to find Stinky's has been shut down by the health department. They seize the opportunity and convert their hideout into a restaurant. Customers line up and buy their burgers. Mr. Krabs makes his first dollar and describes it as the beginning of a beautiful, romantic relationship with money. A customer named Ronnie complains the burgers are even worse than Stinky's, and people can barely keep them down, adding, if it weren't for Stinky's shutting down, no one would eat here. Their success comes from lack of competition, completely by accident. Both Mr. Krabs and Plankton tell self-serving versions of what happened next, each claiming the other became evil and greedy, each painting themselves as the innocent victim who cared about customers, while the other cared only about power or money. Plankton immediately pops out of a pepper shaker and yells, "Lies!" He presents his own version where Mr. Krabs was the greedy one. Karen, Plankton's computer wife who was working as a security system, reveals she recorded the entire thing in her databanks. The true version shows Krabs and Plankton working together peacefully. They open their restaurant in the dump, but get 0 customers until Old Man Jenkins arrives. He agrees to try their burger as the first customer. He takes a bite, smiles, then falls down unconscious. A newspaper appears reading, "Plab Patties KO Old Man J." Mr. Krabs says, "I can't believe we poisoned that sweet old guy." They argue about whose fault it was. Plankton claims Mr. Krabs put too much seaweed sauce. Krabs claims Plankton let it sit too long. They fight over the recipe, and it tears in half. Plankton walks out dramatically, slamming the door. As the door slams, a shelf above the boiling patty meat spills jars of ingredients into the cauldron. Mr. Krabs approaches the contaminated mixture. He says, "Well, that's ruined. These kids'll eat anything," and tastes it. He licks some of the patty mix, and his expression changes completely. He declares, "I've done it! I've discovered the perfect patty batter." He takes this accidentally created formula, created from their fight, from the destruction of their partnership, and builds his entire empire on it. Meanwhile, Plankton returns to the elementary school with his own chum bucket filled with chum burgers. Mr. Krabs shows up with Krabby Patties and knocks Plankton over, declaring, "This is my turf." The kids decide to let customers choose whose burger is better. Big Johnny tries Plankton's chum burger and immediately spits it out on his friends. Billy tries Mr. Krabs' Krabby Patty and declares it has flavor. The other kids celebrate, calling the burgers edible and proclaiming, "We can actually hold it down." All the kids cheer for Rag Boy, while Plankton screams, "I'll steal that cursed recipe from you one day, and I won't stop till I do." The flashback ends. Mr. Krabs celebrates that his recipe was, is, and always will be the best. Plankton responds, "You wouldn't have that recipe if it weren't for me." The episode ends with Karen lecturing them both, saying, "I can't believe you let a recipe ruin such a wonderful friendship." Both tear up. Mr. Krabs admits, "You were my only true friend that didn't have a president printed on him. Money doesn't hug back." Plankton admits, "All these years I've been trying to steal your formula. I was really just trying to steal back our friendship. It's all I ever really wanted. To get back to the way it used to be. You and me against the world." They hug and cry together. Plankton says, "I'm sorry, Krabs, old buddy." Mr. Krabs responds, "Me too. Me too." Then Plankton immediately grabs the formula from Mr. Krabs' back pocket, yells, "Now, Karen!" And his wife Karen grabs the formula as they escape together. The reconciliation was completely fake. Plankton was manipulating Mr. Krabs' emotions to steal the formula, proving that their relationship is damaged beyond any possibility of repair. This origin story reveals several disturbing truths. First, both Mr. Krabs and Plankton lied about what really happened, each creating false narratives to paint themselves as victims. Second, the Krabby Patty formula was created by complete accident after their friendship ended, meaning Mr. Krabs' entire empire is built on something that came from destruction rather than creation. Third, Mr. Krabs immediately claimed the accidentally created formula as entirely his own and used it to build wealth, while Plankton, who helped create the original failed recipe, got absolutely nothing from the partnership. Fourth, Mr. Krabs deliberately antagonized Plankton by showing up at the elementary school and claiming it as my turf, actively preventing Plankton from having any business success. Fifth, Mr. Krabs has spent decades lying about the origin story to make himself look better, creating elaborate false narratives where Plankton wanted to rule the world while he just wanted to satisfy customers. Sixth, when confronted with the truth and given a genuine moment of reconciliation, both characters immediately revert to their established patterns. Plankton betrays the emotional moment to steal the formula, proving the damage runs too deep to heal. Looking at these 3 episodes together reveals a consistent and deeply disturbing pattern. Mr. Krabs carries enormous psychological guilt that manifests as obsessive greed, explosive cruelty, and complete inability to maintain genuine human relationships. In Born-Again Krabs, a literal cosmic judge of souls determines Mr. Krabs has committed sins worthy of eternal damnation specifically for being cheap in ways that caused real harm. In One Course Meal, Mr. Krabs demonstrates a calculated capacity for sadistic psychological torture that deliberately drives someone to attempt suicide while he watches and laughs. In Friend or Foe, Krabs reveals he built his entire business empire on the accidental destruction of his only real friendship, then spent decades lying about what happened to avoid confronting his own role in that betrayal. The theory proposes that Mr. Krabs' obsessive relationship with money serves as an elaborate psychological coping mechanism for deep trauma and overwhelming guilt. He destroyed his only real friendship for profit and status. He's exploited and harmed countless people through his pathological cheapness. He's tortured others for competitive advantage. He's been willing to sacrifice anyone and everyone, employees, customers, even people who love him, for financial gain. The money he hoards represents both his success and his shame. Every dollar is proof he chose greed over genuine human connection, profit over morality, wealth over basic humanity. Mr. Krabs went to hell and was explicitly told he's committed terrible things. He tortured someone to the point of suicide and celebrated the suffering. He built his fortune on friendship betrayed and partnership stolen. The guilt doesn't drive him to genuine reform. It drives him deeper into greed, as if accumulating enough wealth might somehow retroactively justify what he's done. All the money in the ocean can't buy redemption for a crab who sold his soul 1 penny at a time, and he knows it. And if Mr. Krabs is a tyrant driven by guilt, Pearl may be the final punishment, an ever-growing presence in his life that feeds on his money, his fear, and the emotional leverage he can't bring himself to cut off. Before we move on, go ahead and hit subscribe. Totally free, and it really helps us keep this going. All right, let's continue. Pearl, the parasite species. Pearl Krabs is a whale. Mr. Krabs is a crab. Everyone accepts this biological impossibility because it's a cartoon, because adoption exists, because asking questions ruins the fun. The show treats Pearl as Mr. Krabs' daughter and expects viewers to move on. The theory goes darker. What if Pearl is exactly what she appears to be? A completely different species living off Mr. Krabs? What if the father-daughter relationship is a parasitic bond, where Pearl systematically drains her host of resources, growing larger and stronger while he becomes weaker and more desperate. What if her teenage years are a feeding phase, and when she's finished extracting everything she needs, she'll abandon the empty husk of what Mr. Krabs used to be? This theory proposes that Pearl attached to Mr. Krabs at some point in his past and has been feeding off him ever since. The relationship appears familial on the surface, complete with daddy and affectionate moments, mimicking genuine parent-child dynamics to maintain the parasitic bond. Pearl's constant demands for money, attention, and resources are feeding behaviors. Her threats to never leave home are warnings about what happens if the host stops providing. Her teenage phase represents the final stage of resource extraction before she reaches maturity and abandons Mr. Krabs, completely drained. Bossy Boots demonstrates Pearl's capacity to drain an entire business in a single summer, transforming a profitable restaurant into a bankrupt shell. The episode opens with Mr. Krabs announcing that Pearl will work at the Krusty Krab during summer vacation. He claims she has a lot of fresh ideas to bring in some hungry customers. His eyes form dollar signs as he imagines the profits. He's excited about Pearl joining the family business. Pearl arrives with a box containing new uniforms she designed, pink bodysuits with purple flowers and spring-mounted letters. Mr. Krabs immediately puts one on and forces Squidward to wear his. The uniforms cost money that's already been paid for. Pearl has already begun extracting resources before accomplishing anything. Pearl tells SpongeBob, "I've got some completely choral concepts for this old joint, and I'm going to need someone with your kind of talent to help me." The show cuts to an image of the Krusty Krab as a deserted place with a skeleton sitting at a table. This visual represents what Pearl will do. She'll turn the thriving business into a dead zone. The image appears as she describes turning it into a teenage paradise. Paradise for Pearl means death for the Krusty Krab. Pearl begins transforming the restaurant. She changes the name from the Krusty Krab to the Cuddly Krab. She redecorates the entire exterior with tie-dye colors, rainbows, heart-shaped flags, balloons, and giant lollipops. She transforms Mr. Krabs' office with a $40 beanbag chair, a stress relief doll costing 5 payments of $9.95, $20 sea unicorn wall hangers, $35 heart lights, and sea ferns on every table. She removes Krabby Patties from the menu entirely, replacing them with only salad and tea. She takes away SpongeBob's spatula and grill, eliminating the restaurant's core function. She forces SpongeBob to wear a crab costume and wave at cars outside, humiliating the restaurant's best employee. She brings in teenage customers who don't actually spend money. They come to hang out, using the space without contributing to revenue. Mr. Krabs eventually realizes what's happening. He lists the expenses. "What would we do without these beautiful $20 sea unicorn wall hangers? How could we have ever survived without these $35 heart lights? How could we go on without a sea fern on every last table? It's hip, it's coral, it's losing money." He starts crying. He opens his vault to find it completely empty, with a spider crawling around its web. Pearl has drained the Krusty Krab's entire financial reserves. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob, "I can't fire me pride and joy. It would break her fragile little heart." He's paralyzed by the emotional bond, unable to stop the draining even as it destroys him. He makes SpongeBob fire her instead, hiding in his office while it happens. He can't face Pearl directly, even to save his business. When SpongeBob goes to fire Pearl, she reveals the truth. "I can't take it anymore. Nothing I do is working. I've been trying to get fired since day one. I was only pretending to like this place to please Daddy. This job is cutting majorly into my social life." She admits the entire thing was performance. She never cared about the Krusty Krab or helping her father. She wanted to get fired so she could leave without looking bad. She manipulated SpongeBob into firing her so she could escape while maintaining Mr. Krabs' approval. Pearl runs off laughing, jumps into a car with her friends, and yells, "Come on, gang, the mall awaits." She drives away happy and unburdened. Meanwhile, Mr. Krabs collapses and needs to be revived with money. The episode ends with SpongeBob buying all the cuddly crab decorations for 1 year's salary, meaning Mr. Krabs extracts money from his employee to recover from what Pearl did. This episode shows Pearl's feeding pattern. She enters a resource-rich environment, drains it completely through transformation and spending, then abandons it when extraction is complete. She faces zero consequences. She maintains her father's love and approval. She leaves stronger and happier while the host environment is devastated. This pattern repeats across her interactions with Mr. Krabs. Whale of a Birthday demonstrates Pearl's ability to drain massive resources in a single concentrated event, showing how her demands escalate as she grows larger and requires more feeding. The episode opens with Pearl waking up to a radio playing a song called "It's All About You" by Boys Who Cry. The lyrics describe her 16th birthday as a day when everyone has to do just what you say. Pearl dreams of walking a red carpet with photographers taking her picture, declaring, "It's all about me." She crashes through her bedroom ceiling and falls through the floor into the kitchen where Mr. Krabs is cooking. He suggests she might prefer a room on the ground floor. Pearl is literally too large for the space she occupies, breaking through structures with her weight. She's growing beyond what the environment can contain. Pearl tells Mr. Krabs that tomorrow is the most important birthday in my entire life. She threatens him, "If I don't have a completely awesome party, my whole high school reputation will collapse. I'll have to drop out. I won't go off to college. I'll never leave home. You'll have to support me for the rest of my life." This threat reveals the parasitic relationship. If Mr. Krabs doesn't provide resources, Pearl will never detach. She'll remain attached to him permanently, draining him forever. The threat of never leaving is how she ensures continued feeding. At school, Pearl's friends mock Mr. Krabs' previous cheap parties. They laugh about paper clips as party favors, sharing one balloon, and a wooden horse as a pony ride. Pearl runs to the Krusty Krab crying. She approaches Mr. Krabs and demands, "Tell me you've got something totally coral planned for my birthday party." Mr. Krabs promises he won't be cheap. Pearl responds, "Good, because I made a list." The list rolls out of the Krusty Krab and down the road. It's enormous, containing hundreds of expensive items. Mr. Krabs rolls it up and Pearl kisses him, saying, "Now I want everything on this list at my party." She leaves for the mall with friends. This list represents a massive resource extraction demand. She's requiring Mr. Krabs to provide far more than any previous birthday, escalating the feeding requirements. Mr. Krabs gives SpongeBob his credit card and tells him to buy Pearl's present. He says, "Nothing's too good for me, little Pearl. I wanted to give her nothing, but she's too good for that." This reveals his internal conflict. He wants to give her nothing, but he's compelled to give her everything. The parasitic bond overrides his natural cheapness. At the mall, Pearl calls random items the greatest thing I have seen in the whole world repeatedly. A plastic comb, glitter gloss, a sea pony, a celebrity fish named Billy Fishkins, a boat. SpongeBob buys everything she glances at, using Mr. Krabs' credit card. The spending is compulsive and endless. Pearl's desires are insatiable. Every item becomes the greatest thing in the whole world until the next item appears. At the party, everything goes wrong. The decorations are cheap, the popcorn is stale, the punch is dishwater, the cake is cardboard, the entertainment is Squidward instead of Boys Who Cry. Pearl's friends prepare to leave. Pearl screams, "Daddy, how could you? I gave you a list." She runs out sobbing violently, crying, "You've ruined everything. You couldn't stop being cheap, even for me." Mr. Krabs says weakly, "I'll make it up to you somehow, Pearl." He's broken and defeated. Then SpongeBob arrives with a dump truck full of presents. Everything Pearl wanted at the mall, plus a boat. Pearl's mood changes instantly. "Oh, Daddy, I don't know how it could get better than this. SpongeBob signals and Boys Who Cry appear, performing the It's All About You song live. Pearl's friends faint from excitement. Mr. Krabs asks, "Boy, how much is all this costing me?" SpongeBob shows him the receipt. It's enormously long, suggesting thousands of dollars in expenses. Mr. Krabs freaks out and says, "I ought to," but Pearl interrupts by kissing him and saying, "Oh, Daddy, you got me everything I wanted." Mr. Krabs responds, "Aw, nothing's too good for me, daughter." The episode ends with Mr. Krabs saying to SpongeBob, "Don't push your luck, boy." This suggests resentment and awareness that he's been drained, but he's powerless to stop it. The birthday extraction was successful. Pearl got everything she demanded. Mr. Krabs is financially devastated. The parasitic feeding continues. Looking at these two episodes together reveals a disturbing pattern. Pearl's resource extraction escalates over time, requiring more feeding as she grows larger and stronger. In Bossy Boots, she drains an entire business over a summer. In Whale of a Birthday, she extracts massive resources in a single day. Both episodes show Mr. Krabs powerless to stop the draining, despite being aware it's happening. The theory proposes that Pearl is a parasitic organism that attached to Mr. Krabs and has been feeding off him for 16 years. The biological impossibility of a crab fathering a whale is the first clue. They're completely different species with incompatible biology. The show never explains how this relationship formed, treating it as normal and discouraging questions. Pearl's growth pattern supports parasitic feeding. She's enormous compared to Mr. Krabs, having grown to whale size while living off his resources. Whales are the largest creatures in the ocean. Pearl requires massive amounts of food, space, and money to sustain her size. Mr. Krabs provides all of this despite being a small crab with limited resources. The size difference shows how much she's extracted from him. Pearl's feeding behavior follows a parasitic pattern. She makes demands. Mr. Krabs resists initially due to his natural cheapness. Pearl applies pressure through emotional manipulation, threats, or public humiliation. Mr. Krabs capitulates and provides the resources. Pearl consumes them immediately. The cycle repeats with escalating demands. Each feeding episode requires more resources than the last. Mr. Krabs' behavior shows classic host responses to parasitic infection. He experiences internal conflict between self-preservation and providing for the parasite. He knows Pearl is draining him. He cries about losing money. His vault is empty. His business nearly collapses. Yet he continues feeding her. He calls her me, pride and joy, and says, "Nothing's too good for me, daughter," even while being financially destroyed. The emotional bond prevents him from stopping the feeding. Pearl's threats about never leaving home reveal the parasitic relationship's true nature. Normal children want to leave home and become independent. Pearl threatens to stay forever if her demands aren't met. This keeps Mr. Krabs trapped in the feeding cycle. If he stops providing resources, she'll attach permanently and drain him completely over decades, instead of leaving when she reaches maturity. Pearl's manipulation tactics maintain the parasitic bond. She calls him daddy and gives him kisses and affection only after receiving resources. She cries and threatens when demands aren't met. She uses public humiliation through her friends mocking him. She employs emotional blackmail about her reputation and future. These behaviors ensure Mr. Krabs continues providing despite the cost. The teenage phase represents Pearl's final major resource extraction before reaching full maturity. Teenagers require enormous resources: food, clothing, social activities, education preparation. Pearl's 16th birthday is described as the most important birthday in my entire life, suggesting this is a critical feeding phase. After this phase, she'll leave for college and abandon Mr. Krabs permanently. The business draining in Bossy Boots shows what Pearl will do to anything Mr. Krabs builds. She transformed the Krusty Krab from a profitable restaurant into a bankrupt teenage hangout, then abandoned it when extraction was complete. This is practice for what she'll do to Mr. Krabs himself. She'll drain his resources, transform his life to serve her needs, then leave him an empty shell when she's finished feeding. Pearl's complete lack of remorse or gratitude reveals her parasitic nature. She never thanks Mr. Krabs genuinely. She never acknowledges the sacrifice involved in providing for her. She never shows concern for his financial well-being. She only shows affection after receiving resources, suggesting the affection is transactional rather than genuine. A real daughter would care about her father's struggles. Pearl only cares about extraction. The biological impossibility takes on new meaning. Pearl is a whale because she's literally a different species that attached to Mr. Krabs and mimics familial bonds to enable feeding. She calls him Daddy because that's the role that maximizes resource extraction in society. If she presented as what she truly is, a parasite, Mr. Krabs would remove her. By presenting as his daughter, she gains protection, resources, and emotional leverage. Mr. Krabs' extreme cheapness makes him an unlikely host for such an expensive parasite. He values money above almost everything else. The fact that Pearl can override this fundamental personality trait shows the power of the parasitic bond. She's hijacked his parental instincts and emotional vulnerabilities to ensure continued feeding despite his natural resistance. The pattern will end when Pearl reaches full maturity and leaves for college. She'll detach from Mr. Krabs completely, having extracted everything she needs for independent life. She'll take the boat, the clothes, the education funding, all the resources she's accumulated over 16 years of feeding. Mr. Krabs will be left financially devastated, emotionally exhausted, and alone. The parasite will have completed its life cycle and moved on to independent existence. Pearl represents a terrifying possibility that what appears to be family could actually be parasitism. The love, the sacrifice, the pride Mr. Krabs feels are all real emotions, but they're being weaponized by an organism that understands how to exploit them. Pearl has learned that calling him Daddy, giving occasional affection, and maintaining the appearance of a father-daughter relationship ensures maximum resource extraction with minimum resistance. Mr. Krabs is trapped in a parasitic bond he can't escape. He's aware he's being drained. He cries about money loss, worries about bankruptcy, sees his vault empty, but the emotional attachment prevents him from stopping the feeding. He calls her me, pride, and joy, even as she destroys his business. He says, "Nothing's too good for me, daughter," even as she bankrupts him. The parasite has successfully hijacked his psychology to ensure its survival and growth. The terrifying truth is that Mr. Krabs will never recover what Pearl has taken. The money, the time, the emotional energy, all consumed by a growing organism that will leave him behind when extraction is complete. Every birthday will demand more resources. Every summer job will drain another business. Every social event will require massive spending. The feeding will continue until Pearl reaches maturity and detaches, leaving Mr. Krabs as an empty husk of what he once was, wondering where all his money went and why his daughter never calls anymore. If Pearl shows how love can be weaponized into extraction, then Plankton shows what happens when trauma twists someone so deeply that they spend their entire life sabotaging the wrong enemy. While we're at it, consider subscribing. It costs nothing and supports everything we're building here. Now, back to the next part. Plankton, the trauma-driven saboteur. Plankton is the villain of Bikini Bottom. He's the scheming criminal who spends every moment trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula from Mr. Krabs. The show frames him as a jealous failure who wants success he never earned. That's the simple story. The theory goes darker. What if Plankton's obsession comes from genuine trauma? What if he witnessed something so horrible it broke his mind and warped his entire perception of reality? What if he genuinely believes he's trying to prevent a catastrophe, even while his own actions cause harm? This theory proposes that Plankton suffered severe psychological trauma when he and Mr. Krabs accidentally poisoned someone with their original burger recipe. That trauma created a deep-seated belief that any burger formula must be inherently dangerous, especially the Krabby Patty formula created from the same contaminated mixture. Plankton's decades-long quest comes from a twisted, heroic impulse. He believes Mr. Krabs is poisoning Bikini Bottom, and he must stop him. The tragic irony is that Plankton's own food is far more dangerous, but his trauma-distorted perception makes him unable to see this truth. Friend or Foe reveals the traumatic event that destroyed Plankton's sanity. The episode opens with Plankton attempting to steal the formula using a birthday cake bomb. When the plan fails, SpongeBob asks why Plankton hates them. Mr. Krabs reveals there was a time when he and Plankton were best friends, born on the same date, November 30th, 1942. The flashback shows young Krabs and Plankton as inseparable companions, despite being bullied relentlessly. Young Plankton was shot with spitballs and stuffed into straws. Young Krabs was mocked as Rag Boy for wearing clothes made from trash. Old Man Jenkins even ripped the clothes off Krabs to use as a washcloth. When young Krabs found his first penny, he spent it on a balloon for Plankton, showing their friendship was genuine. They discovered Stinky Burgers, the only burger place in town. When they tried to order, Stinky refused to serve them, saying they'd drive away all the normal customers. After Stinky's restaurant was shut down by the health department, Krabs and Plankton saw an opportunity. They worked together at the dump to create their own burger recipe. They opened their restaurant and made sales, though customers complained the burgers were even worse than Stinky's, and people could barely keep them down. The business only succeeded because competition had been eliminated. Both Mr. Krabs and Plankton later tell self-serving versions of what happened next, each claiming the other became evil and greedy. Karen, Plankton's computer wife, reveals she recorded the true version. Young Krabs and Plankton worked peacefully together until Old Man Jenkins arrived as their first customer. He took a bite of their burger, smiled, then fell down unconscious. A newspaper appeared reading, "Plab Patties KO Old Man J." Young Krabs said, "I can't believe we poisoned that sweet old guy." This is the trauma. They created food that looked edible, tasted good enough to make someone smile, and then immediately knocked that person unconscious. They poisoned someone with their cooking. Krabs and Plankton immediately fought about whose fault it was. The recipe tore in half as they argued. Plankton walked out. As he slammed the door, a shelf spilled ingredients into the boiling patty meat. Mr. Krabs approached the contaminated mixture and said, "Well, that's ruined. These kids will eat anything." He tasted it anyway. His expression changed completely. He declared, "I've done it. I've discovered the perfect patty batter." He took this accidentally created formula from the same base that poisoned Old Man Jenkins, now contaminated with unknown ingredients, and built his business on it. Plankton never saw what happened after he left. He never learned the formula changed. All Plankton knows is that he and Krabs created poison. They fought, and then Krabs somehow turned that into the most successful restaurant in Bikini Bottom. From Plankton's perspective, Mr. Krabs is feeding poison to customers every day. Plankton's regular demonstrates the tragic irony at Plankton's core. The episode opens with Plankton grumbling about his empty restaurant. A fish named Nat walks in wanting a chumstick. Plankton is shocked someone actually wants his food. When Nat eats it and says, Plankton panics and says, "Oh no, please don't sue me." This reaction reveals Plankton expects people who eat his food to have legal grounds for a lawsuit. Nat returns the next day for another chumstick, then promises to keep returning. He declares, "You've got a regular customer on your hands." Plankton celebrates, saying, "At last, I've got my revenge." This phrasing suggests Plankton sees having successful food as revenge against someone, presumably Mr. Krabs. Plankton gloats to Mr. Krabs at the Krusty Krab, declaring, "I no longer need to copy you, Krabs. I've got my own winning recipe now." When Nat arrives asking for another chumstick, Plankton tells Mr. Krabs, "I'll see you later, loser." SpongeBob tries repeatedly to get Nat to eat Krabby Patties, but Nat refuses every time, insisting, Plankton's chum is my favorite breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I love chum. He claims to eat chum for every meal and refuses to eat anything else. Mr. Krabs becomes desperate and breaks into the chum bucket that night to steal Plankton's chum recipe. Karen announces that Nat is approaching with an unusually large wad of cash. Both Mr. Krabs and Plankton react with excitement. But Nat throws the money at Karen's screen and says, "The deal's off, computer. I can't eat another bite of that slop, no matter how much you pay me." This is the revelation. Karen had been paying Nat to eat the chum. Nat explains, "I have eaten 10 of those things, and I've already had to go to the doctor. Twice." Medical workers put him on a stretcher. Nat says, "If you need me, I'll be getting my stomach pumped again." Plankton's chum is so toxic that eating it requires immediate medical intervention. Nat needed his stomach pumped twice after eating 10 chum sticks. Someone had to be paid significant money to endure eating it. And even with financial incentive, they refused to continue. Karen admits, "The deal was that I paid Nat to eat your chum, so you'd quit your constant complaining." Plankton breaks down, saying, "Should have known. Why would anyone ever eat my slop?" He immediately accepts his food is terrible. He doesn't defend the recipe. Deep down, Plankton knows his food is bad. Looking at these episodes together reveals the psychological pattern defining Plankton's existence. In Friend or Foe, Plankton experiences severe trauma when he and Mr. Krabs poison Old Man Jenkins. Plankton walked away with half of a poisonous recipe and knowledge that his cooking could harm people. He never saw that Mr. Krabs accidentally created a different formula. All Plankton knows is that they created poison, and then Krabs turned that into success. This creates the foundation for Plankton's obsession. He genuinely believes the Krabby Patty formula must be dangerous because it came from the same source that poisoned Old Man Jenkins. From Plankton's perspective, Mr. Krabs took their shared traumatic mistake and weaponized it for profit. The tragic irony revealed in Plankton's regular is that Plankton's own food is far more dangerous. His chum requires medical intervention to survive eating, yet Plankton can't see this. His trauma has created a massive blind spot. He believes his chum is safe because he controls the recipe. He believes Krabby Patties are dangerous because they came from the poisonous burger he witnessed. The psychological mechanism is projection. Plankton can't acknowledge he's creating dangerous food because that would mean confronting his deepest fear, that he's exactly like Mr. Krabs, serving poison to customers for money. The trauma from poisoning Old Man Jenkins was so severe that Plankton's mind can't handle the idea he might be repeating that mistake. So his brain projects all the danger onto Mr. Krabs instead. When Karen reveals she paid Nat, Plankton immediately accepts his food tastes bad, and nobody would voluntarily eat it. What he can't accept is that his food is dangerous, causing the same harm that traumatized him. That truth is too painful because it makes him identical to the Mr. Krabs he's been fighting for decades. Plankton's stated goal and unconscious motivation are different. Consciously, he wants the formula to become successful. Unconsciously, he wants to prove it's dangerous and vindicate his trauma-based belief that Mr. Krabs is poisoning people. Every failed theft attempt reinforces the narrative that Mr. Krabs is hiding something terrible. The moment in Friend or Foe when Plankton and Mr. Krabs almost reconcile shows how close Plankton gets to breaking free. They admit they miss their friendship. Mr. Krabs says, "You were my only true friend that didn't have a president printed on him." Plankton says, "All these years I've been trying to steal your formula. I was really just trying to steal back our friendship." For a brief moment, Plankton achieves clarity. He understands his obsession is really about the relationship he lost. Then he immediately steals the formula and runs away. He can't actually accept healing because healing means acknowledging he spent decades chasing the wrong thing. Plankton is trapped in a prison of his own making. He witnessed a real trauma. Old Man Jenkins did get poisoned. But Plankton took that real trauma and built an entire false reality around it, one where he's the hero trying to prevent harm. He can't see that Mr. Krabs moved on and created something different. He can't see that his own inability to move on has made him into exactly what he fears: someone serving dangerous food to innocent people. Plankton's story is a tragedy about how trauma can trap someone in the past, distort their perception of the present, and prevent them from building a better future. He had one bad experience that broke something inside him, and he's spent his entire life trying to fix it by fighting the wrong enemy. The real enemy was always inside Plankton himself: the trauma he never processed, the pain he never healed, the reality he never accepted. If Plankton shows how trauma traps someone in the past, Sandy shows what happens when the escape isn't obsession, but a non-stop addiction to danger that never lets the mind slow down. Sandy, the addiction-driven adrenaline junkie. Sandy Cheeks is presented as the smart one in Bikini Bottom. She's a scientist, an inventor, a karate master, an explorer. The show treats her extreme behavior as quirky Texas enthusiasm, as harmless overachievement from someone who's just really into self-improvement and physical fitness. The theory goes darker. What if Sandy's constant need for extreme activities, dangerous sports, and violent confrontation is addiction? What if her science projects and athletic pursuits are cover stories for compulsive adrenaline-seeking behavior she can't control? What if she's endangering everyone around her because she needs increasingly dangerous stimulation to function? And when she's deprived of her fix, she has violent breakdowns that terrorize entire communities. This theory proposes that Sandy suffers from severe adrenaline addiction, combined with compulsive need for physical dominance and competitive superiority. Her identity is built entirely around being the strongest, the smartest, the most extreme. When that identity is threatened, or when she's forced to stop the dangerous behavior, she becomes unstable and dangerous. Her friends are enablers and victims. SpongeBob in particular serves as her primary target for increasingly life-threatening activities. The evidence shows someone who can't say no to danger, who drags others into situations that literally melt them into puddles, who terrorizes entire towns when deprived of her addiction, and who prioritizes her need for stimulation over basic safety and sanity. Pre-hibernation week demonstrates Sandy's addiction at its most destructive, showing what happens when an adrenaline junkie faces the prospect of forced withdrawal. The episode opens with Sandy in her tree dome, frantically preparing for hibernation. She's raking leaves, hanging laundry, scrubbing the bird bath with a toothbrush, painting the fence. Every movement is urgent and manic. SpongeBob is supposed to be helping, but he's raking individual leaves with a tiny rake. Sandy pushes SpongeBob away and does the work herself, saying, "We gotta get this stuff done before it's too late." SpongeBob asks what the big rush is. Sandy explains she's hibernating next week, going to sleep for the whole winter. SpongeBob asks if he can do that too. Sandy says, "No, silly, it's a mammalian thing." Sandy reveals her calendar, showing hibernation begins in 1 week. SpongeBob calculates this gives them 168 more hours of playtime. Sandy starts panicking. She lists everything they still need to do. "We gotta climb some things. We gotta jump off of stuff. We gotta ride. I don't want to go to sleep yet." She begins crying, saying, "I can't burn carbs in my sleep." This is withdrawal anxiety. Sandy is facing an entire winter without physical stimulation, without adrenaline, without the rush that defines her existence. She's crying because she can't handle the thought of forced inactivity. Hibernation is biological necessity, something she has no control over, and the loss of control over her addiction is causing a breakdown. SpongeBob offers to sacrifice all his time to her. Sandy's mood shifts immediately. She holds up sweatbands and declares, "For the next 7 days, it's gonna be you, me, and these sweatbands." This isn't friendship. This is Sandy recruiting her enabler for a final binge before forced withdrawal. The activities begin. Sandy rides a giant clamshell down sand mountains so fast she catches fire, leaving a trail of molten glass. She streaks past people who burst into flames from her speed. She flips in midair, shouting, "I'm hotter than a hickory smoked sausage." SpongeBob rides down the mountain on his tongue. When he hits the ground, 2 bones stick out of his body. He says, "I'm going to be feeling this tomorrow," as his damaged arm falls off. Sandy tells him, "I gotta say, I'm impressed with you, SpongeBob. You're making this the best pre-hibernation week ever." She's complimenting him for enduring extreme bodily harm. SpongeBob goes home exhausted and falls asleep immediately. Sandy launches him out of bed in the middle of the night into a frozen lake. Both become blocks of ice. Sandy says cheerfully, "Nothing like a refreshing morning dip, huh, SpongeBob?" SpongeBob is shivering, asking, "What happened to sleeping?" Sandy pulls down the calendar and says, "I'll be asleep all winter. We only got 3 days for fun." She swims away, saying, "The giant clams like to feed at this hour." She's treating this as normal. She woke SpongeBob in the middle of the night, launched him into freezing water, and is now taking him to feed giant clams during their most dangerous hunting period. The activities escalate. SpongeBob plays Extreme Jacks, where he runs to pick up jacks before a bowling ball crushes his head. Sandy plays the same game, and the bowling ball cracks her helmet. She asks, "Isn't this great?" SpongeBob agrees enthusiastically, even though he's being injured repeatedly. He's been conditioned to accept this as normal friendship activity. They play extreme Q-tips on top of the sea needle. Sandy explains, "We just whack each other with these giant ear cleaners till one of us falls off." SpongeBob asks, "Sandy, are you sure we're supposed to be standing up here?" She hits him off the tower before he finishes speaking. SpongeBob screams and lands on a fire hydrant, impaling himself. Sandy rides up on a tandem bike, saying, "Come on, SpongeBob, we're going for a tandem ride through the park." SpongeBob thinks this sounds safe compared to what just happened. They ride into an industrial park, a factory with conveyor belts, barbed wire, and crushing machinery. Sandy says, "This is where the real action is." She pedals across barbed wire, calling it technical. They ride through a conveyor belt with a giant crushing mouth at the end. Sandy shouts, "I hope we make it," as they barely escape. The bike crashes and SpongeBob melts into a puddle. Sandy tosses a fishing rod onto his puddle form, saying, "Wake up, Slowpoke, we're going fly fishing." The scene shows an airplane. Sandy's idea of fishing involves planes and extreme altitude. SpongeBob thinks to himself, "This squirrel's trying to kill me. Any more of these stunts and I'll be reduced to a puddle." SpongeBob tries to talk to Sandy. He starts saying, "I'm feeling sort of," but his mouth melts away from his eyes. He pulls it back up and tries again. His mouth melts away again. Sandy puts her hand over his mouth and says, "Hold that thought, SpongeBob, 'cause it's time for a down-home favorite." She holds up a piece of hay and announces, "Find the hay in the needle stack." She throws it into a giant pile of needles. SpongeBob bites his fingers in fear. Inside the needle pile, he says, "Ow," repeatedly as needles prick him. One needle pricks his nose, causing it to deflate like a balloon. SpongeBob digs underground and escapes. Sandy calls out, "Found it, SpongeBob, come on, best 2 out of 3. SpongeBob runs away, thinking, "Gotta hide." He considers his house, but decides Gary can't keep a secret. He considers Patrick's rock. As he jumps toward it, his pants get stuck on coral. He struggles free, leaving his pants behind. Sandy finds the pants and gasps. She examines them, saying, "SpongeBob's tie, and all his other little dressins. But, he always folds his clothes before running around in the nude. Something terrible must have happened to him." Sandy's immediate assumption is that SpongeBob is dead or seriously injured because she found his abandoned clothing. She doesn't consider he might have deliberately left. She can't imagine anyone would voluntarily stop playing with her. This shows how disconnected she is from the reality that she's been torturing him for days. Sandy goes to the Krusty Krab and announces, "I'm rounding up a search party." "SpongeBob's gone missing," Mr. Krabs says. "Man the lifeboats." Sandy organizes teams. Alpha Team, you search uptown. Gold Team searches downtown. The entire town is mobilized to find SpongeBob. The search becomes increasingly extreme. Sandy forces people to search sulfur fields, moist caves containing giant sea elephants, poison sea urchin coves, and leech farms. Someone reports he's not at the poison sea urchin cove while covered in poison urchins. Sandy responds, "Well, look again." Someone else reports he's not at the leech farm while covered in leeches. Sandy responds, "Well, look again." Squidward says, "He's not in my thoughts." Sandy snaps, "Well, think again." This reveals her state of mind. She's forcing people to repeatedly search locations that are actively harming them. She's not concerned about their safety. She only cares about finding SpongeBob so she can continue her addiction activities. Sandy announces through a megaphone, "The time has come to double, no, triple our efforts." Squidward protests, "How about a break? We've been at it for days." Someone else pleads, "Think about the children." Sandy responds, "That's a good idea. Use the children to crawl into small places you couldn't normally reach." She's weaponizing children for the search. Someone whispers, "This is a load of barnacles." Sandy hears this and yells, "I heard that. No one's going anywhere until we find SpongeBob." The town has become her hostage. She's holding everyone captive until her addiction enabler is recovered. People start trying to trick Sandy by presenting fake SpongeBobs. Someone holds up a random fish squished into a square shape. Someone holds up a cereal box. Someone holds up a banana. Sandy becomes increasingly frustrated. Someone points at the sky and says, "Oh look, he's up in the sky." Everyone uses this distraction to escape and hide under Patrick's rock. Sandy continues searching alone, lifting entire houses off their foundations. She lifts house after house, shouting, "SpongeBob, where are you?" She's destroying property in her manic search. The narrator says, "That squirrel's gone crazy." Someone hiding under the rock says, "But she'll never look under a rock." SpongeBob laughs and says, "You said it. Sandy'll never find us." Everyone glares at him. They throw him out from under the rock. Squidward pops out and yells, "Oh look, it is I, SpongeBob, out here in the open." Sandy turns around. SpongeBob screams in horror and begs to be let back under the rock. Sandy grabs SpongeBob and hugs him while everyone cheers. She says, "Oh, SpongeBob, I was so worried. I thought something terrible happened." She grabs his arm, saying, "Come on, there's just enough time to go atom smashing." She starts running, but SpongeBob doesn't move. His arm stretches. SpongeBob finally breaks down. "Sandy, wait, you've got to make time. This is important. I am a man. I can't play with you anymore. I just can't take the games. They're tearing me apart." He rips off his nose and throws it on the ground, then grabs Sandy's legs, crying, "There, I said it. Now just promise we can still be friends. Please, Sandy, this isn't easy." This is an intervention. SpongeBob is telling his friend that her addiction is destroying him. He's literally tearing apart. His body can't handle the physical abuse anymore. He's begging to remain friends while setting a boundary. He needs her to stop the extreme activities. Sandy doesn't respond. She's fallen asleep standing up. Hibernation has begun. SpongeBob realizes she's unconscious and laughs with relief, saying, "I never thought I'd say it, but thank Neptune for hibernation." He joins her in sleep, resting his head on her foot. The only thing that stopped Sandy's destructive addiction spiral was biological shutdown beyond her control. This episode reveals Sandy's complete inability to regulate her own behavior. She escalates activities until her friend is literally melting. She terrorizes an entire town for days, forcing them to search dangerous locations. She holds people hostage and weaponizes children. She destroys property. She's described as crazy by the townspeople. The only thing that stops her is involuntary unconsciousness. This is textbook addiction behavior, continuing destructive patterns despite severe consequences, escalating to maintain the same high, and being unable to stop voluntarily. Karate Island demonstrates Sandy's competitive addiction, showing how her need to be recognized as the best fighter overrides her intelligence and common sense. The episode opens with SpongeBob receiving a videotape announcing he's won an all-expenses-paid trip to Karate Island to be crowned King of Karate. SpongeBob is ecstatic, shouting karate yells and declaring, "I'm gonna be crowned King of Karate." Sandy comes over, and SpongeBob tells her the news. Sandy's immediate response is skepticism combined with jealousy. Karate Island? I've never heard of Karate Island. SpongeBob says, "Oh, sure, Sandy. All the big karate experts go there." Sandy responds, "But my karate is better than yours by a country mile, and I've never been invited." This reveals Sandy's competitive addiction. She can't celebrate SpongeBob's achievement. Her first thought is that she deserves recognition more than he does. She's offended that someone with inferior skills received an invitation, while she, the superior fighter, did not. SpongeBob says, "Maybe your karate was the best, but now they've recognized a new number one." Sandy says, "There's something rotten in the Alamo. I'd better tag along with you and see if it's on the up and up." She's framing this as protective concern, but her actual motivation is competitive jealousy. She can't tolerate the idea that SpongeBob might legitimately be better than her, or receive recognition she hasn't received. They arrive at Karate Island, where 3 fish wait on rocks. SpongeBob announces, "Hello there, the King of Karate has arrived." Master Udon bows and welcomes SpongeBob-san. Sandy introduces herself, saying, "I do a little karate myself." SpongeBob dismisses her. "Sandy, Sandy, Sandy. Mister. Udon isn't interested in a karate novice like you. He only has time for royalty." SpongeBob has internalized the competitive hierarchy. He's calling Sandy, who literally just said her karate is better than his by a country mile, a novice. He's drunk on the recognition and using it to put down his friend. This shows how the competitive dynamic corrupts relationships. Master Udon asks SpongeBob to demonstrate some moves. SpongeBob says, "Bring on your best fighters. I'll try to go easy on them." 3 fighters appear. Sandy warns, "SpongeBob, your karate's not good enough to handle those sidewinders." SpongeBob yells karate sounds at the first fighter. The fighter falls to the ground unconscious. SpongeBob says, "Yep, that's how the King of Karate does it." Sandy says, "Something smells like rancid rodeo around here." She recognizes this is fake. The fighters are falling down from simple yells. This is obviously staged, but Sandy doesn't intervene more forcefully, because part of her is watching to see if SpongeBob really might be better than her. Her competitive addiction makes her hesitate, even when she knows something is wrong. All the fighters get knocked out. Master Udon declares, "Excellent. Truly, you are King of Karate." A throne is revealed. Master Udon says, "King of Karate-san, it is time for you to take your rightful place on your throne." Sandy says, "All right, Udon, I'm on to you." This place is as crooked as a dizzy sidewinder. SpongeBob sits on the throne and tells Sandy, "Come, Sandy, take your place next to the king and share in my crowning achievement." He claps twice and orders a chair for his air-breathing friend. A. Fish struggles to set up a lawn chair. Sandy sits in it saying, "SpongeBob, y'all are getting a bit wily." SpongeBob asks, "Oh, do I detect a note of jealousy, Sandy?" Sandy responds, "Heck, I could karate you into a country fiddle with one paw tied behind my back." SpongeBob laughs and says, "But who's being crowned King of Karate? Not you." Sandy says, "I'm getting off this crazy train," and storms out. This exchange reveals the toxic competitive dynamic. SpongeBob is taunting Sandy about not receiving recognition. Sandy is asserting her superior skills. Neither of them is focused on the obvious scam happening around them. Master Udon tells SpongeBob, "Don't worry about her. She is missing out on the opportunity of a lifetime." Suddenly, SpongeBob's hands are chained to the throne. Master Udon reaches into his robe and pulls out a pen. SpongeBob realizes something is wrong. Sandy is walking away in the distance, muttering angrily. That dang SpongeBob. Who does he think he is? I taught that yellow egomaniac everything he knows about fighting, and that ain't much. She hears SpongeBob screaming, "No!" in the distance. She stops and says, "SpongeBob's in trouble." Then she hesitates. SpongeBob is the king of karate. He doesn't need me. He can handle this himself. SpongeBob screams, "Sandy, I need you! I can't handle this myself." Sandy finally responds, "Hold on, buddy," and runs back. This hesitation is crucial. Sandy heard SpongeBob screaming. She knew he was in trouble. But her competitive resentment made her initially decide to let him handle it himself. She was going to abandon him because he claimed to be better than her. Only his explicit cry for help overcame her resentment. Sandy enters the building where she must pass through the 4 floors of fear. She fights the Tickler, Lip Service, and Filthy Phil, defeating each with increasingly absurd methods. She reaches Master Udon, who reveals the entire thing was a real estate scam to sell timeshare condos. He says, "If there was a real Cutout the Island, I'd be a millionaire." SpongeBob asks, "You mean I'm not king of karate?" This is what devastates him. Not the danger, not the scam, but the loss of the title. Master Udon tries to sell Sandy a timeshare plan. She refuses and they fight. Sandy defeats him violently, knocking out his teeth and sending him into the ocean. As they leave, SpongeBob apologizes. "Sandy, I'm sorry I acted like a jerk back there. Thanks for saving me from buying a condo." Sandy responds, "Aw, shucks, SpongeBob. That's what friends are for." SpongeBob asks, "I still have one question though. Does this mean I'm not king of karate anymore?" Sandy says, "You are in my book, SpongeBob. You are in my book." This ending seems sweet, but it reveals the ongoing problem. Sandy validates SpongeBob's competitive need for recognition, rather than addressing the toxic dynamic. She doesn't say, "The title doesn't matter," or "We're both skilled in different ways." She gives him the title he craves, reinforcing the competitive framework that nearly got him killed. The episode shows Sandy's competitive addiction makes her suspicious and jealous when others receive recognition. She can't celebrate a friend's achievement without comparing it to her own superiority. She recognizes obvious danger, but hesitates to intervene because part of her wants to see if the competition is real. She initially abandons SpongeBob in danger because he claimed to be better than her. Her need to be recognized as the best fighter is so strong, it overrides friendship, logic, and basic safety. Someone's in the kitchen with Sandy demonstrates what happens when Sandy is stripped of her physical identity and how quickly she turns to violence as her primary response. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab, with Plankton hiding in a sesame seed on a bun. SpongeBob serves the Krabby Patty to Sandy. Sandy unzips her suit and slips the patty inside to eat it. Plankton jumps out of the seed and faints from lack of water. Sandy returns to her tree dome and enters the bathroom. She takes off her diving suit and turns on the shower. She grabs the fur on her head and literally rips her entire fur pelt down the middle, stepping out of it. She hangs it up and steps into the shower. She's washing herself while Plankton wakes up. He sees Sandy's fur hanging on a hook and realizes, "That's it! I think I found out how to get the Krabby Patty formula once and for all." Plankton steals Sandy's fur pelt and helmet, stuffing them into the helmet and locking Sandy in the bathroom. Sandy finishes her shower and walks over to get her fur. She discovers it's gone and says, "What in tarnation?" She tries to open the bathroom door and discovers she's locked in. She says, "I'm locked in!" She kicks the door down violently. Sandy steps out furious. She rips the towel off her body and yells, "Some low-life varmint stole my things and broke into my home. My home! I'm going to get that son of a guitar stringer." She puts a coffee pot over her head as a makeshift helmet. This is Sandy's immediate response to theft. Not calling authorities, not problem solving, but violent pursuit. She needs to fight now. Meanwhile, Plankton has turned Sandy's pelt into a robot suit and goes to the Krusty Krab pretending to be Sandy. Sandy searches Bikini Bottom for the thief. She runs into a fish and demands, "You seen anybody in these parts hauling a fur pelt?" The fish looks at Sandy's hairless pink body and underwear and laughs hysterically, calling her a naked chipmunk. More fish gather and laugh. Sandy asks, "What is so funny about having my fur stole?" Someone says, "Aren't you ashamed of having your pink rat flesh exposed?" Sandy realizes the attention will alert the thief, and she needs to cover herself. She hides behind garbage cans, rips seaweed off a bush, and makes it into a skirt. Sandy continues searching. She warms herself by a vent, and the seaweed skirt overheats and shatters, exposing her underwear. Police see her and say, "Hey, look, a hairless goat!" Sandy flees in embarrassment. People point and laugh. A reporter takes her picture. Sandy runs through town being publicly humiliated. Sandy takes refuge in bushes. People continue mocking her, calling her a nudist ferret. An angry crowd pelts her with juice boxes. Sandy dives into a manhole and hides in the sewer, feeling miserable. She says, "What am I going to do? If I'm ever going to catch this thug, I'm going to need some help." Back at the Krusty Krab, the Sandy robot enters and Plankton tries to steal the Krabby Patty formula. The real Sandy emerges from a hole in the floor and immediately recognizes her pelt. She yells, "My pelt!" SpongeBob sees both Sandys and says, "Sandy, you're naked, and you don't have any clothes on." Sandy confronts the robot. "Unhand my pelt, you unknown varmint." Plankton pops out of the robot's mouth, saying, "Only from my cold, dead feelers." Sandy becomes enraged. "Plankton, I should have known this was your doing. Now feel this." She punches the robot. She kicks it. She knocks it into the wall violently. Sandy rolls up her pelt and Plankton flies out with the formula. Mr. Krabs catches the formula. Sandy catches Plankton and says, "Gotcha! And now for the appropriate punishment for a no-good yellow belly like yourself." She puts Plankton in a jar of mustard. Plankton screams, "My eye! This condiment is highly irritating to my eye." Police arrive saying, "We'll take that sicko off your hands." Sandy holds up the jar saying, "Cops, thank goodness you're here. Take this sicko away." The police respond, "Actually, we're referring to you, ma'am. Public nudity is against the law in this county." They handcuff Sandy saying, "But don't fret, you'll look just fine in prison orange." This episode shows Sandy's immediate resort to violence when her physical identity is threatened. She doesn't problem solve. She doesn't ask for help. She kicks down doors, hunts the thief personally, and responds to recovery of her pelt with immediate physical assault. Even when she gets her pelt back and punishes Plankton, she's arrested because she violated laws in her violent pursuit. Sandy's identity is entirely tied to her physical body and her ability to fight. When stripped of her fur, her physical marker of strength and identity, she becomes desperate and violent. She can't function in society without her fighting costume. She's arrested at the end because her addiction to violence and confrontation made her break laws. She put someone in a jar of mustard as appropriate punishment, rather than letting authorities handle it. Looking at these 3 episodes together reveals a consistent and disturbing pattern of addiction behavior that Sandy cannot control despite severe consequences. She needs extreme physical stimulation, the way addicts need their substance. When faced with withdrawal, she has breakdowns. When her competitive status is threatened, she abandons friends. When her physical identity is challenged, she resorts to violence immediately. Pre-hibernation week shows the clearest addiction pattern. Sandy faces forced withdrawal from adrenaline during hibernation. This causes crying, panic, and desperate need to cram in as much stimulation as possible. She recruits SpongeBob as her enabler and subjects him to increasingly dangerous activities, despite watching him literally melt from the abuse. She can't stop. Even when he tries to set boundaries, she talks over him and forces him into more danger. When SpongeBob escapes, Sandy has a complete breakdown and terrorizes an entire town. She forces people to search poison urchin coves and leech farms repeatedly. She weaponizes children. She destroys property. She holds the entire population hostage until her enabler is recovered. This is not normal friendship behavior. This is addict behavior when deprived of their fix. The only thing that stops Sandy is biological shutdown she can't control. She doesn't choose to stop. She doesn't recognize the harm she's causing. She doesn't respect SpongeBob's boundaries when he finally sets them. Her body forces hibernation and she falls asleep mid-conversation. Without that biological override, she would have continued the destructive pattern indefinitely. Karate Island reveals Sandy's competitive addiction and how it corrupts her judgment. She immediately responds to SpongeBob's achievement with jealousy and resentment. She can't be happy for him. She has to assert her superiority. When she recognizes the situation is fake and dangerous, she doesn't intervene decisively because part of her wants to see if the competition is real. Most tellingly, when SpongeBob screams for help, Sandy's first response is to let him handle it himself because he claimed to be better than her. Her competitive resentment nearly causes her to abandon a friend in danger. This shows how addiction overrides normal human connection and compassion. She can't set aside her need for competitive dominance even when someone's life is at stake. Someone's in the kitchen with Sandy shows Sandy's immediate resort to violence when her physical identity is threatened. She doesn't problem solve or seek help. She kicks down doors and hunts the thief personally. When she recovers her pelt, she doesn't celebrate the recovery. She immediately punishes Plankton violently by putting him in mustard. This results in her own arrest because her addiction to violence made her break laws. The episodes show escalation patterns common in addiction. Sandy's activities get more dangerous over time. In pre-hibernation week, the activities start with sandboarding and escalate to atom smashing and needle piles. She needs increasingly extreme stimulation to achieve the same satisfaction. This is tolerance building, a hallmark of addiction. Sandy shows inability to stop despite consequences. SpongeBob is literally melting. The town is terrorized. She's arrested. None of these consequences change her behavior. She doesn't learn or moderate. She continues pursuing the extreme activities and violence because she needs them to function. Sandy demonstrates loss of control. She can't moderate her behavior voluntarily. She can't say, "This is enough," or "We should stop now." She continues until external forces stop her: biological hibernation, police arrest, physical defeat. Without external intervention, she would continue indefinitely. Sandy shows withdrawal symptoms. When faced with hibernation, she cries and panics. She says, "I can't burn carbs in my sleep." This is withdrawal anxiety, the fear of being without the substance. When SpongeBob escapes and she can't continue her activities, she has a breakdown and holds a town hostage. This is withdrawal-driven behavior. Sandy's addiction corrupts all her relationships. She uses SpongeBob as an enabler, subjecting him to activities that harm him. She abandons him in danger when competitive jealousy overrides friendship. She can't celebrate his achievements. She can't respect his boundaries. Every relationship serves her addiction needs. Sandy's identity is entirely built around her addiction. She's the scientist, the athlete, the fighter. Remove those identities, and she becomes violent and desperate. In Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy, losing her fur, her physical marker of strength, causes immediate violent pursuit. She can't exist as just Sandy. She has to be Sandy the karate master, Sandy the extreme athlete, Sandy the scientist doing dangerous experiments. The competitive obsession reveals how addiction hijacks the reward system. Sandy can't feel satisfaction from normal achievement. She needs to be the best, to be recognized as superior, to dominate others physically and intellectually. Normal success doesn't register. She needs constant validation of her superiority to feel anything. Sandy's science is often cover for dangerous behavior. Her experiments frequently involve extreme physical challenges or violence. Her inventions enable more dangerous activities. She frames destructive behavior as scientific inquiry or athletic training, giving it legitimacy and social acceptance. This is rationalization, a common addiction defense mechanism. The town's fear of Sandy in pre-hibernation week shows how her addiction has made her dangerous to the community. They hide from her. They call her crazy. They know she's unstable, but they can't confront her because she's physically dominant and violent. She's created an environment where people fear her, enabling her to continue destructive behavior without accountability. Sandy represents the adrenaline junkie who can't stop, the competitor who can't lose, the fighter who can't put down her weapons. Her intelligence makes it worse. She can rationalize her behavior, create elaborate justifications, and manipulate situations to enable her addiction. She's destroyed friendships, terrorized communities, and endangered lives. And she can't stop, because stopping means confronting who she is without the extreme activities, the violence, the competition. Without those things, she has no identity. The addiction has consumed everything else. She is the addiction, and everyone around her suffers for it. All right, that's it for today. Make sure to subscribe. It's free and really helps us keep bringing you more of this content.